Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alana Frick. Alana Christine Frick was born in September 1977 in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, to Croatian immigrants, George and Anafi. She was the younger of two daughters, and her birth was seen as a miracle by her parents, who had been told by doctors that they would not be able to conceive again after her older sister Caroline. Alana was very close to her sister from an early age and was raised with strong values of hard work and education. Her parents worked tirelessly at a large car factory to provide for their daughters and instill in them a love of learning. Both sisters excelled in school, but Alana stood out for her determination and passion for learning, spending all her free time reading and pursuing extracurricular activities like dance, gymnastics, and track and field. During her summer breaks, Alana worked in cornfields to help her family and learned to budget wisely. She excelled in math and science, and by high school, she had set her sights on a career in medicine. She graduated as the top student and enrolled in a prestigious medical university without issue. It was during high school that Alana began dating Matthew Ryan, who was also studying medicine. Their romance lasted throughout their university days, but after graduation, Alana decided to continue her studies in Ottawa's university residency program, while Matthew settled for a job at a local hospital. Despite the distance, Alana and Matthew's relationship continued until nearly 2002, during which time they even planned to marry. However, they eventually decided to remain friends. By then, Alana was interning at one of the country's top clinics and was working towards earning a doctorate, while Matthew's career had stalled. In February 2003, Alana experienced love at first sight while working a night shift at the hospital. She walked into the staff room and noticed a new colleague, Mohammed Shamji, who instantly captured her attention. Mohammed was a year older than Alana and a resident in the neurosurgery department. Coming from an esteemed family of medical professionals, Mohammed was born and raised in Ottawa. His father, Farid Shamji, was a distinguished surgeon, and his mother, Edith, was a skilled psychiatrist. His older brother, Ali, was a seasoned medical biophysicist, and both brothers had graduated from Yale University. Mohammed later returned to Canada to earn his doctorate from the University of Western Ontario. Although Mohammed initially showed no interest in approaching Alana, she was drawn to him and attempted to catch his eye. Eventually, Mohammed asked his colleagues for her phone number, sent her a message, and their romance began to flourish. Alana thought Mohammed was shy and introverted because he rarely initiated conversations, felt uneasy on dates, and would suddenly change topics or become silent. However, it was later revealed that his distant behavior wasn't due to shyness, but rather a lack of interest, as he was already secretly dating another woman. When Alana found out about the other woman, she became determined to win Mohammed over and become his sole partner. Their relationship was tumultuous during the first year, with 3 breakups and reconnections, mainly due to Alana's persistence. Despite her parents' advice to leave Mohammed, Alana remained committed, believing she had found her true love. Alana showered Mohammed with gifts, surprises, and home-cooked meals, but he only occasionally reciprocated her efforts. Meanwhile, Mohammed seemed to simply accept her affections, reciprocating only infrequently, creating an unbalanced dynamic in their relationship. In the summer of 2004, Alana discovered she was unexpectedly pregnant, which caused anxiety for both her and her partner. Despite their surprise, Mohammed, who was raised in a traditional Muslim country, felt pressured to marry Alana before their child was born, following cultural customs. The couple had 2 wedding ceremonies in early September 2004, one that respected Mohammed's family's cultural traditions and another with friends at a trendy restaurant complex. Although they appeared happy and in love, their marriage marked the beginning of a difficult period that would ultimately end in tragedy. In January 2005, they moved into a spacious house in an upscale Ottawa neighborhood and welcomed their daughter, Yasmin Ina. However, the birth of their daughter did not improve their marriage. Mohammed prioritized his career and education, neglecting his wife and newborn daughter. Moreover, he openly expressed his disappointment at not having a son. After having her baby, Alana took maternity leave to care for her child and manage the household. However, this led to tension with her husband, who would come home from work and isolate himself in his office, hardly spending time with Alana and their daughter. As time passed, he grew increasingly anxious, irritable, and critical, often belittling Alana's appearance, refusing her cooking, and even calling her stupid and useless. Despite her struggles, Alana kept her family problems private, not even sharing them with close friends or her parents. However, one day, while talking to her mother on the phone, her husband came home in a bad mood and began insulting Alana, which her mother overheard. Her mother tried to defend her, but her son-in-law shifted the blame to Alana, claiming she was responsible for their failing marriage. Alana's mother advised her to file for divorce and leave the abusive relationship, but Alana refused, insisting that she loved her husband and could handle the situation herself. Alana remained silent about Mohammed's physical abuse because the verbal abuse had become routine for him. However, the situation escalated in the summer of 2005 when Mohammed, in a fit of rage, punched Alana in the face, breaking her nose. Alana, holding her baby, fled to friends and reported the domestic violence to the police. She also decided to divorce Mohammed and leave him for good. Surprisingly, Mohammed began pleading with Alana to return, promising to never hit her again, raise his voice, or engage in any form of abuse. He claimed he would change and make their family life perfect, controlling his emotions. While Mohammed appeared genuinely remorseful, his actions were motivated by self-interest. As a young neurosurgeon, he was about to enroll at Duke University to pursue his doctorate, and a criminal conviction would jeopardize his promising medical career. Mohammed's primary concern was his own future, but he managed to convince Alana to drop the charges and file for divorce. She even agreed to follow him to North Carolina, where he would continue his studies and earn a degree. After a period of turmoil, Mohammed and Alana's family life became more stable. Mohammed was accepted into a competitive biomed engineering program, a significant achievement. Alana, meanwhile, enrolled in a master's program at Duke University, where she received a scholarship to cover her tuition. As a result, the couple had more time for each other, and their relationship became more solid. They decided to have another child, and in August 2007, their daughter Fisa was born. Although Mohammed had hoped for a son, the family was generally happy. In the summer of 2009, the family returned to Canada, settling back into their Ottawa home. Alana quickly returned to work as a family doctor at a prestigious hospital, earning a good reputation. Mohammed juggled his work, studies, and university teaching responsibilities. Around the same time, social media was becoming popular, and the couple started a personal blog that presented an idealized image of their family life. Behind their perfect facade, Mohammed and Alana's relationship was troubled. He controlled every aspect of her life, dictating who she could see, what she wore, and even monitoring her online activities. He would openly criticize her appearance, style, and parenting, but Alana chose to remain silent and tolerant of his behavior. As time passed, Mohammed's aggression and yelling increased, always blaming Alana for their arguments and problems. In 2011, he was offered a prestigious fellowship in spinal surgery in Calgary, which he accepted. However, he moved without his family, leaving them behind in Ottawa, and they were forced to maintain a long-distance relationship for over a year. During a visit home, Mohammed left his laptop on, and Alana discovered a message on his social media from a woman, implying a romantic involvement. When Alana confronted him directly, he admitted to having an affair and didn't deny it. This revelation was a devastating blow to Alana, and she considered divorcing her husband again. Her family thought she wouldn't forgive him this time, but surprisingly, Alana gave her family another chance. Mohammed promised to end the affair and start fresh in Toronto, where he had received a prestigious job offer. Mohammed and Alana had a third child, Marius, in 2013, hoping to strengthen their family. However, Mohammed's behavior towards Alana didn't change, and he continued to focus on his medical career, becoming a respected neurosurgeon. Alana also advanced in her career, but tension between them grew. During a family ski vacation, Mohammed's abuse resumed, leaving Alana with a deep cut on her arm that required stitches. Initially, she claimed it was a skiing accident, but later confided in her friend that it was from an argument over another affair. Alana overheard a private phone call between her husband, Mohammed, and his mistress. When she confronted him about it, he physically abused her. A friend advised Alana to divorce Mohammed, but she refused. Her friend jokingly suggested that Alana have an affair to get revenge, and although they laughed, Alana might have considered it a viable option to get back at her cheating husband. The summer of 2016 was difficult. While their older kids were at camp, Alana's youngest child stayed with her parents. During this time, the couple's relationship deteriorated. In early September, they celebrated their 12th anniversary on social media, but just a week later, they discussed getting a divorce. Mohammed refused, stating he was content, while Alana felt desperate. She started an affair with a colleague who had shown interest in her. Alana found solace in this new relationship, enjoying the care, attention, and feeling loved again. She became so enthralled that she might have considered leaving her children behind to be with her lover. On November 25, 2016, a fierce argument erupted in the family when Elena told her husband Mohammed that divorce was inevitable. The next day, she consulted a divorce lawyer and then departed for a 3-day medical conference in another city. During her time away, Mohammed frantically sent her messages begging her to reconsider and salvage their marriage for the sake of their children. When Elena returned home on November 30th, she made a final phone call to her parents, attempting to reassure them that everything was okay despite her anxious tone. What her parents didn't know was that Elena had tried to contact the police that evening, but unfortunately, she misdialed the number, which would have devastating consequences. The following day, December 1st, Elena's mother Anna tried to reach her daughter, but couldn't get through, so she called her son-in-law Mohammed to find out what was going on. In a calm tone, Mohammed deceived Anna, telling her that Elena had abandoned him and their children in the middle of the night to be with another man. Elena's parents were suspicious of Mohammed's story, knowing their daughter would never abandon her children. They contacted a close friend of Elena's who lived nearby, asking her to keep an eye on the Mohammed home while they rushed to Toronto to file a missing persons report with the police. Alana's family was worried when her friend said her car was still in the driveway. When her parents arrived at her house, everything seemed normal, but Mohammed was upset, insisting that Alana was with her boyfriend and that the police had been called unnecessarily. He had already told the police this when they visited earlier. Later, on December 2nd, a man walking his dog near the river, about 24 miles from the Mohammed's home, found a new-looking large suitcase under a bridge. Despite initial hesitation, his curiosity led him to open it, and he was shocked to find the body of a blonde woman inside. He immediately contacted the police, who sent the suitcase and body to the medical examiner to identify the victim and determine the cause of death. Alana's body was easily identified due to a luggage tag on her suitcase from a recent conference trip. Her parents confirmed her identity. An autopsy revealed that she had suffered multiple abrasions and bruises, but the primary cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation and a broken neck. The body was found dressed in pajamas, with no shoes, and positioned in a way that suggested she was placed in the suitcase shortly after death. Mohammed, the suspect, was apprehended the same evening at a coffee shop where he was consulting with a lawyer, apparently preparing to flee the country. However, he was caught before he could escape. He was charged with first-degree murder, but the neurosurgeon denied any involvement in the crime. A disturbing aspect of the incident came to light. Their 12-year-old daughter, Yasmin, had unknowingly witnessed her mother's murder. According to Yasmin, she heard screams and noise coming from her parents' room and rushed in. She cracked open the door to see her father kneeling behind the bed, with her mother likely lying on the floor, out of her sight. Mohammed yelled at Yasmin, telling her to leave, shut the door, and go back to bed. The next morning, he told the girls that their mother had left. Despite her young age, Yasmin sensed that something terrible had happened, but she struggled to believe that her father could have killed her mother. To protect Yasmin from having to testify in court, Mohammed confessed to the crime and recounted the events of that fateful evening. Mohammed and his wife, Alana, got into an argument about her infidelity and desire for a divorce. The situation escalated quickly, and Mohammed physically attacked Alana, knocking a phone out of her hand as she tried to call the police. He struck her multiple times in the face, pinned her to the floor, and strangled her. Their daughter walked into the room but couldn't see what was happening because of the bed. When Mohammed realized Alana was no longer breathing, he tried to resuscitate her, but it was too late. He had broken her neck during the attack. He then put her body in a large suitcase, drove around for hours, and eventually threw the suitcase off a bridge into a river, hoping the current would carry it away. However, the suitcase got stuck against the bridge's foundation in the darkness. During Mohammed's trial in 2017, his father, Farid Shamji, caused an uproar by making disparaging comments about his deceased daughter-in-law. Shamji tried to justify his son's actions, claiming Alana had been unfaithful and provoked Mohammed. These comments led to an investigation, and Shamji's medical license was revoked in April 2019. Mohammed was convicted of second-degree murder and received a life sentence, but he will be eligible for parole in 14 years. Since he had already served time during the trial, he could be released as early as 2030. As part of his sentence, Mohammed is not allowed to contact his children or Alana's parents and must pay them a substantial amount of money in compensation. He has also been banned from practicing medicine or teaching again, having his medical license revoked permanently. Alana's parents are now taking care of the children who have been left without their friends. Welcome to my channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Savannah Greywind. On the morning of Saturday, August 19, 2017, Norberta Greywind watched her 22-year-old pregnant daughter Savannah struggle up the stairs to their third-floor apartment. It was a hot day, and Savannah, who was 8 months pregnant, could barely walk on her swollen legs. A few hours later, William Ho, the boyfriend of Brooke Cruz, the same neighbor who had invited Savannah over, entered the apartment. Inside, he found Brooke scrubbing the bathroom. Savannah's bloody body lay on the floor. There was also a basin with a baby in it on top of the toilet lid. When William saw this, Brooke held out the infant to him and said, "This is our baby. This is our family. Please help me." In a move that defied all logic, William helped clean up the blood. He carried bags of bloody towels and clothes out of the apartment. They wrapped bags around Savannah's body, securing them with duct tape and ropes before later disposing of her corpse. Broken families and death marked this tragic event, coinciding with a birth. William Hone told his co-workers that his spouse had given birth to a little girl named Phoenix the day after these events took place. In an ironic twist, the couple who took Savannah's life also named her daughter after a mythological bird known for dying and being reborn. In an interview later on, Brooke's boyfriend described his short days with Heisley Joe, the name given by her family, as beautiful days. He remarked how that baby made him feel like part of a happy little family for just 2 days. Savannah Greywind was born on August 9, 1995 in Burke County, North Dakota. Her father is an ordinary white American, while her mother belongs to the Spirit Lake Sioux Indian tribe. Including herself, she had 2 brothers, Joy and Casey, and a younger sister named Kayla. Norberta and Joe, Savannah's parents, were always very proud of their children. The family resided in Fargo, North Dakota until Savannah turned 9 years old. In 2000, they relocated to Spirit Lake Reservation. This place, located in the eastern part of the state, is a Native American Indian area. Savannah had a deep love for nature and animals, particularly horses. It was on the reservation that she met Ashton Mound. The pair first crossed paths when Savannah was 15 years old and remained inseparable ever since. When it became time for college, her family moved back to Fargo. Savannah found employment caring for the elderly at a nursing home while studying to become a nurse. She was preparing to sit for her exam in September. By this period, Savannah was an expectant mother with her first child on the way. She and Ashton secured an apartment by putting down a deposit and planned to move into their new home in early September. For now, she stayed with her parents on the bottom floor of a 7-unit, 3-story apartment building. In this same building, on the 3rd floor, resided Brooke Cruz, 38 years old, and William Hone, 33 years old. It is often said that no one is born evil. Rather, individuals are shaped by their experiences. Brooke Cruz cultivated within herself aspects capable of committing heinous acts of murder as she sought completeness by embracing all facets of her personality, including darker ones beyond her control. Drawn to mysticism since childhood, Brooke found a peculiar allure in crimes perpetrated by serial killers and high-IQ maniacs. As an adult, she professionally delved into criminal psychology to understand their mindset better. Brooke Cruz, the personality, which was characterized by impulsive behavior, anxious avoidance, and irascibility. By the time she reached 38, she was overwhelmed by depression. Physical illness and exhaustion from unhealthy relationships that included regular physical abuse further compounded her troubles. A disturbing fear of losing her partner because she couldn't conceive added to her stress. Brooke couldn't take it anymore. Darkness mingled within her mind. Killing a pregnant woman was seen by her as one way to get the infant she so desperately wanted. After her arrest, Brooke's apartment revealed much about her state of mind. It contained a stack of books on topics ranging from clinical criminal forensic and legal psychology to obstetrics. In a desk drawer were notes listing birthing kit items such as scissors, blades, clamps, and gloves, an infant cardiopulmonary resuscitation bag, and the hormone oxytocin. Brooklyn Cruz grew up in Florida's Bradenton, Sarasota neighborhood. Her parents divorced, leaving 7 children, including Brooke, to live with their mother. Recollections from one sister described their family life as quite good. However, diary entries kept by Brooke throughout later life painted a different picture, depicting a difficult childhood she struggled to forget. As she aged out of adolescence, Brooke's once caring and open-minded demeanor changed significantly. She became testy, but not aggressive, a troubled teenager among siblings who chose to stay with their father instead of their mother, who referred to him as a professional criminal. Life with her father didn't pan out well either. She subsequently found herself moving in and out of foster homes. From that point onward, the siblings lost touch with Brooke. They only learned that Brooke is the mother of at least 7 children through news coverage related to a shocking crime. At the age of 15, Brooke met Aaron Edwards. In 1995, when she was about 17, she gave birth to a child in County, Florida. She left the infant with the father and moved away. A court ordered her to pay child support, but Brooke did not honor the court order. She remembered her daughter when she turned 14. Their communication was limited to a few Facebook messages in the evenings. Brooke worked as a waitress at the Chinese Dragon restaurant and as a sales representative and animal specialist at Petland Pet Store in Bradenton, Florida. In early 2002, at age 23, Brooke was jailed in Missouri for falsifying documents but was released on parole on August 31, 2002. However, she was arrested again and sent to jail in Hidalgo County, Texas, for a parole violation. In 2006, at age 27, Brooke married Carl Cruz, a carpenter from Minnesota. During their marriage, she gave birth to 2 children and worked as an administrative assistant in her husband's carpentry shop. Unfortunately, the marriage lasted only 3 years due to infidelity on her part. They divorced in June 2009. According to documents, custody of the children went to Carl. Brooke then moved to California without explanation. Throughout her life, One consistent activity for Brooke was keeping diaries and recording events meticulously. After a tragic event, these entries became public. The diaries revealed numerous romantic relationships marked by initial enthusiasm, heart-shaped marks around the edges. She returned to her now ex-husband's house after a trip to California. She registered on a dating site and began to study psychology in earnest. On the dating site tagged, the young woman met Andrew Murray, a chef from Katoomba, New South Wales, Australia. She decided to move to Australia in late 2011. In January 2012, an argument erupted over a child custody issue. During this conflict, Brooke grabbed a knife and attacked her ex-husband. Police arrested her and filed criminal charges. Brooke denied the knife attack, but chose not to wait for a court hearing. Instead, she fled to Australia using false immigration papers and married Andrew. This Australian marriage lasted exactly 6 months. Andrew discovered her American past, including her husband, children, and fake immigration papers. After uncovering these truths, his wife, according to Andrew, began threatening him with arrest for aiding and abetting. This led Andrew to go to the police himself and disclose everything just in case. Andrew recalled their marriage as being filled with conversations about maniacs. He later revealed that as early as 2012, Brooke was already obsessed with crime. She studied psychology and nursing and did her thesis on serial killers. From her words, she was always reading books about maniacs and crime and could tell you anything about them. Andrew observed that over time, Brooke became increasingly aggressive. It took 6 months and 10 days from her arrival until she returned to the US in October 2012. On September 22, 2012, Brooke made a diary entry noting that she had changed significantly for the better after returning from Australia. She engaged in a lengthy custody battle for her 2 children. She might have had a chance for a new life if she reconciled with Andrew Murray, but instead met William Hone in late 2012. William Hone had been convicted of child abuse months earlier after bringing his son to the hospital with a fractured skull near his right ear in January 2011. Brooke fell in love with this man who was twice divorced, had 2 kids, didn't pay child support, had anger issues, and was under a court order for no contact with his children. Brooke was full of energy and desire for change, aiming to be her new self, take care of the kids, and move forward positively, and found herself employment. In 2013, Brooke transformed a hobby into a profession by enrolling at Minnesota State University in Moorhead. There, she took courses like social behavior, physiological psychology, cognitive theory, psychology of deviant behavior, and directed research. She had a keen interest in the psychology of serial killers. Initially, her relationship with William was wonderful. However, over time, the relationship turned codependent with joint use of alcohol and illegal substances. Brooke believed she was controlling well, but felt progressively worse. She began avoiding her children, changed jobs due to conflicts with staff, and became more engrossed in her psychological research into humanity's darker sides. On December 23, 2014, she lost her custody battle. Judge Waldemar of the Otter Tail County Courthouse granted temporary sole physical and legal custody of the children to their father, Carl. That same day, Brooke suffered a panic attack and was taken to the hospital emergency room with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, according to medical records. Years later, during her trial for murder, she would state that the events in 2014 marked a turning point in her life when she lost the ability to control her impulses and evaluate her actions clearly, though she did not specify what those events were. In January 2015, an entry appeared in her diary stating, "I feel like I started this relationship with a purse full of love coins, and slowly but surely, this purse is empty, and I just have nothing to give." She expressed that their intimacy wasn't the same as before. "About once a week he makes time for me. The intimacy lasts about 7 to 15 minutes. He doesn't care at all about my satisfaction." Brooke complained of his inattentiveness and became increasingly withdrawn. 5 months later, she was diagnosed with gallbladder disease. Physical and psychological deterioration set in. Brooke practically stopped leaving the house. In May 2016, police responded to a call. William Hahn had brutally beaten his girlfriend in the bathroom. He pleaded guilty to assault and was banned from approaching Brooke. 6 months later, police came again on a neighbor's call and found Hahn in Brooke's apartment. He pleaded guilty to violating the restraining order. They backed together after this, but a healthy moment never returned to their relationship. Brooke was unable to have children after an abortion in 2011. William, however, constantly demanded a child from her. In early 2017, after another fight, Brooke lied to Hahn about being pregnant to prevent him from leaving. She even emailed him a fake ultrasound picture and a photo of a positive pregnancy test. She found a recording of some random baby's heartbeat online and showed it to her partner, claiming it was their future child's heartbeat. By August 2017, they had another big fight. It became obvious there was no pregnancy. Since William had already told everyone about his future paternity and did not want to appear foolish, he literally demanded a child from his girlfriend. He mentioned the pregnant neighbor living 3 floors below them. Brooke Cruz later told police officers that she took William's demand as an ultimatum and believed he desired to take the baby away from Savannah, though this wasn't directly stated by him. Brooke had medical knowledge and began compiling a list of what she needed to induce labor. She anticipated and did whatever her young lover wanted her to do. On a Saturday afternoon in August, Brooke knocked on the door of a downstairs apartment and offered Savannah $20 for serving as a model for a dress Brooke was supposedly sewing. Savannah accepted before going upstairs to her neighbor's apartment. Before heading up, Savannah ordered pizza, expecting to have some when she got home later on that day. An hour later, with the plan to drive her younger brother to work, Savannah's mother did not return on time. Her brother decided to go upstairs by himself around 2:30 in the afternoon. He heard the hum of a sewing machine but received no response at the door. A few minutes later, Savannah's father, Joe, also went upstairs and knocked. Brooke responded that they were still working on the dress and Savannah was trying it on, hence why no one could open the door. Meanwhile, Norberta drove her son to work herself. Upon returning home, she found an untouched pizza. Concerned, she texted her daughter several times. Getting no reply, she went upstairs. A neighbor mentioned that Savannah had left soon after completing their fitting. Worried, Norberta went back to her apartment and observed all of Savannah's personal items. Shoes, purse, car keys were still there. Given Savannah's condition and discomfort caused by heat and swelling, it was unlikely she had gone for a walk. Norberta called Ashton to check if he had picked up their daughter. To her dismay, Ashton said Savannah wasn't responding to him either. Increasingly anxious, Norberta contacted the police and drove around looking for her pregnant daughter, who might have taken ill suddenly. While driving around, Norberta theorized that if Savannah had gone somewhere nearby, she would have seen signs of her. However, an uneasy feeling suggested otherwise. Later that day, police searched Brooke and William's apartment since it was Savannah's last known location. The landlord allowed entry and cooperated fully. However, without a warrant, police did not search more thoroughly into closets or behind closed doors. The police informed the family that since Savannah was an adult capable of making her own decisions without informing them, and because there was no apparent crime evidence at or near home, the initial investigation concluded that she had left voluntarily. Savannah's family perceived this approach as indifferent and found it deeply upsetting. Police returned 2 more times for subsequent searches, but were unsuccessful in finding any additional information or clues regarding Savannah's whereabouts. William Hahn later testified during one of these searches as part of the ongoing investigation process. On August 23, 2017, William's colleagues informed law enforcement that he had boasted about having an infant at home. That same day, residents of the apartment complex reported hearing a baby crying from apartment number 5 and immediately alerted the police. This information enabled officers to secure a warrant and return to the familiar apartment for a comprehensive search. During this search, a newborn baby girl was found alive. Brooke divulged that Savannah herself had given her the baby 2 days after her disappearance. According to Brooke, Savannah did not want to keep the baby and had come over originally to assist with sewing a dress. On that day, she inquired how she could induce labor herself. She then left only to reappear 2 days later at 3 a.m. with the baby in her arms and handed her to Brooke. The couple was subsequently arrested, and Savannah was officially reported missing. The infant was taken to a local hospital and placed in temporary custody of Cass County Social Services. A few days later, DNA testing confirmed parentage, and she was reunited with her father. For 3 additional days, police and numerous local residents scoured the valley in search of Savannah. Chief Todd urged property owners and landlords to inspect their properties, buildings, garages, outbuildings, and vacant apartments for any signs of intrusion or other indications that someone might have been there. On August 27th, 8 days after Savannah's disappearance, a fisherman discovered a body wrapped in plastic along the Red River near Harwood. The body was identified as Savannah through a distinctive tattoo on her leg that read, "Too beautiful for Earth." On August 28th, Brooke Cruz and William Hone were formally charged with conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to kidnap, and providing false information to police authorities. The couple began to talk. Brooke stated she initiated the altercation by accusing pregnant Savannah of stealing mail and mistreating her cat. The verbal argument escalated into a physical confrontation. Brooke pushed Savannah, causing her to fall and hit her head on bathroom sink, leading to loss of consciousness. Brooke then used a knife to perform an incision from hip to hip and remove the baby. Savannah drifted in and out of consciousness during this procedure. Under questioning, Brooke confirmed that William Hahn was unaware of the impending plan. According to her, when William arrived home, he entered the bathroom, saw Savannah, and inquired if she was alive. Brooke responded that she did not know and sought assistance. William briefly left the bathroom and returned holding a rope with which he strangled Savannah. Next, Brooke said they cleaned the floor and walls, then placed Savannah's body into a bathroom closet. When law enforcement arrived at their door, Brooke attempted to remain composed. The officers conducted a superficial search of the apartment without a warrant. Therefore, they couldn't inspect closets or dressers thoroughly. During these searches, according to the perpetrator, the infant was concealed under a blanket on their bed next to William. The child remained very calm and did not cry, thus avoiding detection at that time. By August 20th's third inspection, Savannah's body had already been moved into a dresser while the infant was hidden in a suitcase. In the early hours of August 21st, they transported the dresser downstairs and loaded it into their Jeep Cherokee to dispose of it by the river. William Hahn denied participating in the crime itself, but admitted only to hiding the newborn baby girl and providing false information to law enforcement in an attempt to cover up related activities. Both Brooke and William were assigned bail set at $2 million each, an amount William described as unrealistic and unreasonable for any ordinary individual. Brooke Cruz a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. William's involvement in the crime wasn't proven during the trial. Additionally, it came to light that Brooke's cellmate, Jennifer Robinson, testified against her. According to Jennifer, Brooke disclosed that she strangled Savannah with a rope because she discovered Savannah's affair with William and suspected that Savannah's child might have been his. On September 28, 2018, a jury acquitted William of conspiracy to commit murder. However, on October 30, 2018, after pleading guilty to kidnapping, he received a life sentence in prison. The following spring, in May 2019, William appealed to the Supreme Court. By October 7, 2019, at the sentencing review trial, Judge Olin, who initially sentenced William, indicated that despite the Supreme Court's dissent, he would still impose the harshest possible sentence at that time, 20 years in prison. Considering William had already spent 775 days behind bars by then, he must serve over 7 more years of his 20-year sentence. Baby Hazel remained unharmed despite such an unnatural delivery and is now 6 years old and attending kindergarten. Savannah's parents and the girl's father share joint custody. The grandparents manage a public Facebook page where they post updates about their granddaughter's well-being and activities. The case has gained significant attention, with Norberta being adamant that her daughter's disappearance wasn't taken seriously because Savannah was Native American. She commented on how different it would have been if a white woman had disappeared. "I've lived in Fargo almost my whole life and seen how differently Native Americans are treated." Following Savannah's death, Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp introduced Savannah's Law, which was signed into law in October 2020. This law aims to combat violence against Native American women by enhancing collaboration between federal, state, and tribal authorities. Norberta remarked on the law's passage, "It's sad that my daughter had to die for people to take Native Americans seriously." Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Crystal Perry. Crystal Perry was born on August 23, 1963, in the small American town of Rumford, Maine. She was the youngest of 10 children, and their parents had to provide for all of them, which was understandably a challenge. Crystal and her siblings grew up quite independently with strict parents, unable to watch over all the kids. Their older sister, who was just 12 when Crystal was born, took care of them like a mother, always looking out for her younger brothers and sisters. Growing up in a tense environment, they all wanted to start their own separate lives as soon as possible. Eventually, they scattered to different cities and states. Crystal was no exception. She wanted to start a family of her own and met a guy named Tom in high school. They soon got married and moved to California, but eventually, Crystal realized that big city life just wasn't for her. After a year and a half, they decided to return to Maine, settling in a small town called Bridgeton, about an hour away from her hometown. Crystal got a job at a local shoe shop, while Tom took on various odd jobs. Soon, Crystal discovered she was pregnant, and they welcomed their daughter Sarah. Despite the fact that Tom had initially wanted to be a father, their relationship with Crystal became complicated after their daughter's birth. He spent more and more time at a local bar, squandering almost all their money on alcohol. Once, he even took the money Crystal had set aside for groceries, as they didn't earn much. Tom's drinking habit sometimes left them with no money even for food. At some point, Crystal decided to file for divorce. Tom continued to see his daughter from time to time, but wasn't actively involved in her life. The situation escalated when Tom got a new girlfriend, who started to harass Crystal. She called and threatened Crystal, show up at her place, and cause scenes, all because she simply didn't like that Crystal and Tom had once been married. Afraid to let Sarah visit her father, Crystal moved in with her mother. Over the years, she worked hard to save enough money to buy a house of her own. A few years later, she finally had the opportunity and purchased a small house on the outskirts of Bridgeton. The house was located just a few dozen yards from a picturesque lake surrounded by a forest. Crystal and Sarah were thrilled to have their own home just for the two of them. On May 10, 1994, when Crystal was 30 and Sarah was 12, they watched a solar eclipse together. The next day, as usual, Crystal went to work and Sarah to school. In the evening, they had dinner together, and Crystal tucked her daughter into bed. A few hours later, Sarah suddenly woke up to a loud scream. At first, she thought her mom was arguing with someone on the phone, but she quickly realized it was much more serious. Crystal was screaming at the top of her lungs, and Sarah immediately thought someone was attacking her mom. The door to her bedroom was slightly ajar, and through her fear, she came closer to it. Sarah realized that the screams were coming from the kitchen, but she couldn't see what was happening from where she stood. Sarah was gripped by fear and afraid to move or make any sound. After a few seconds, she heard footsteps and thought that whoever had attacked her mom was coming for her. She hid behind the bed, waiting for her door to swing open at any moment. Instead, she heard the kitchen drawer open, followed by a sound like someone was rummaging through the silverware. Crystal continued to scream and beg for mercy, and in the next few seconds, Sarah heard sounds as if someone had started stabbing her mom with a knife. With each new stab wound, her cries became increasingly muffled until they stopped completely. Despite being only 12, Sarah understood clearly that some unknown criminal was killing her mom. She wanted to rush to her mother's aid, but was paralyzed with fear. Sarah also realized that she had no chance against the knife-wielding person, and they would likely just kill her too. After her mother's screams stopped, Sarah couldn't move for several minutes. She waited for the criminal to come to her room, but the house was eerily silent. She finally left her room and went to the kitchen, where she encountered a disturbing scene. The lights were off, and the room was only illuminated by the moonlight through the window. As Sarah approached the kitchen, she glanced at the wall clock and saw that it was exactly 1 a.m. On the kitchen floor, she found her mother lying in a pool of blood that covered the entire floor. Despite being in a state of shock, Sarah recognized the urgency of getting help as soon as possible. Next to her mother's hand, she saw the telephone receiver. She picked it up and dialed 911, but there was complete silence on the line. Sarah then rushed to Crystal's room, where the second phone was, and tried to call the police again, but this number also did not work. She dialed the numbers several times, then realized she had only one option left: seeking assistance from the neighbors. Sarah rushed out into the street in just her pajamas, barefoot. It was May, and the temperature was quite low. It had also been raining that night. But she didn't think about anything except helping her mother. The closest house was around half a mile down the road towards the city center. She reached it and began knocking on the door, but no one answered. Sarah then ran to other houses, but again, no one opened the door. She kept running towards the city center, knocking on several more doors, but still no one responded. Eventually, she reached an Italian restaurant where the owners lived in the attached building. This time, they finally opened the door. Sarah told them that someone had attacked her mother, and the shocked residents led her inside. Sarah called 911 herself and reported what had happened. The officers immediately headed to their house. The first thing they noticed was the amount of blood. It was literally everywhere, on the floor, walls, and practically on every kitchen item. Crystal was dead, and the medical experts could tell at a glance that she had almost no chance of survival, even if she had received help immediately after the attack. Given the severe blood loss, it would have been impossible to save her. On the front door glass, the police found a palm print, but quickly realized it likely belonged to Sarah. No other fingerprints were found at the crime scene, but there were numerous shoe prints on the kitchen floor, stained with blood. Investigators took photos to try to determine the size and model of the shoes, thinking they had most likely belonged to the killer. The prints also led toward Sarah's bedroom, but for some reason, the perpetrator turned back and didn't enter the room. Detectives also noticed a strange detail. Apparently, the killer tried to wipe away some of the blood from the floor. Considering that almost the entire kitchen was covered in it, along with Crystal herself, this seemed odd. It was obvious he couldn't have wiped away all the blood. Then detectives noticed that some blood drops on the floor were in different shapes. Most of them looked as if they had landed at an angle. According to investigators, they had likely flown off the knife the perpetrator used to attack the victim, but there were also other drops that had fallen on the floor at a right angle and, judging by the splatters, from a greater height. Detectives speculated that apparently the perpetrator had injured themselves during the murder, and this blood belonged to them. Another confirmation of this theory was the fact that these drops led to a roll of paper towels, and there were none left on the way out of the house. Most likely, the killer used these towels to stop the bleeding and immediately left the crime scene. Medical experts found over 50 stab wounds on Crystal's body. The murder weapon was not found in the house, leading detectives to believe that the perpetrator took it with them. Experts only confirmed that it must have been a kitchen knife. The killer struck with such force that a piece broke off and lodged into the victim's body. Crystal had also been sexually assaulted, and experts were able to extract a sample of the perpetrator's semen along with the blood drops. It was sent to the lab. However, there was a problem. Due to funding shortages, the local laboratory was quite overloaded, so results would take at least 6 months. As a result, detectives had to begin the investigation without any evidence. First, they ruled out robbery since nothing was missing from the house. There were no signs of forced entry either, leading police to speculate that the victim had opened the door to the perpetrator herself. She was in her pajamas, suggesting she was unlikely expecting guests. Investigators theorized that she either knew the killer or someone unfamiliar knocked on the door and convinced her to let them in under some pretext. The detective decided to start with the only witness, Sarah. They went to the hospital where she was being held for health checks and began questioning her. The police asked why she ran to the neighbors instead of calling 911 from home. Sarah replied that both their phones weren't working. But this answer seemed strange to the investigators when they arrived at the crime scene and were able to make calls without any problems. The detectives assumed that in such a stressful situation, Sarah could have simply gotten confused. The receiver of the first phone was off the hook, and to make a call, it needed to be placed back. As for the second phone, they didn't rule out that Sarah might have dialed the wrong number in haste, or the phone line might have temporarily gone out due to the rain. Then the police started asking her if she saw the killer. Sarah responded that she had not left her bedroom until it was all over, but the police treated her story with a bit of skepticism. They asked how she could know that her mother was attacked with a knife. Sarah replied that it was obvious, but the detectives continued to press her. They felt that she might be withholding some information and that she had actually seen the perpetrator. In the first 3 days after the murder, the police interrogated Sarah 18 times, hoping that her story would change. But she continued to insist that everything had happened as she told them. While pursuing other leads, detectives stumbled upon their first breakthrough. They found a pair of boots at a local shoe store, whose sole patterns matched the bloody footprints on the floor. They also discovered that Crystal had been harassed by Teresa, the girlfriend of her ex-husband. Despite the killer being obviously a man, the police decided to investigate her, considering that Teresa had repeatedly threatened the victim with murder. They could have found an accomplice and convinced him to commit the crime. However, detectives found no evidence to support this theory. Investigators then learned that at the time of her death, Crystal was seeing a man named Dennis. They had met 2 years prior when he started working in the shoe shop, and they began dating shortly after. Dennis eventually proposed to her, and although Crystal agreed, they never got married. Detectives found out that their relationship was quite tense. Crystal and Dennis argued a lot, and sometimes he displayed aggressive behavior, such as breaking things or hitting the wall. However, the police couldn't find any evidence that he had ever raised a hand on Crystal. The next day after the murder, they went to his house. When he opened the door, the investigators asked if he had left his house that night or seen Crystal. Dennis immediately asked if she was dead, and in the next second, he collapsed on the floor. After he regained consciousness, he began answering the detectives' questions. Dennis confirmed that he had planned to visit Crystal that evening, but got delayed after work, helping a friend fix a car. Upon returning home, he called Crystal, but she said it was too late, leading to an argument, and Dennis ended up staying home. While the police couldn't be 100% sure he was telling the truth, they were able to verify that he did help his friend that evening. Dennis also agreed to a polygraph test, and the operator didn't detect any signals of lying, except for one when he asked if he felt responsible for Crystal's death. Dennis answered no. Detectives also noticed that he had the same shoe size as the killer, but they found no matching footwear in Dennis's house. He agreed to provide a DNA sample, but made a strange request. He asked the detectives to come to his workplace through the back door to avoid disturbing others if they decided to arrest him. He explained that his boss had always treated him well, and he didn't want to disrupt the workflow. Considering that he continued to insist on his innocence, this request seemed suspicious. The police found out that Crystal's best friend, who lived in another town, had told them that just a few weeks before, Crystal had called her and said that she was scared of Dennis. Their arguments were becoming increasingly tense, and Dennis was growing more aggressive with each altercation. Crystal even thought about breaking up with him, but feared his reaction. During the conversation, she didn't provide any useful information, but as soon as the police left her workplace, Dennis came in and started asking what she had told the detectives. Despite their efforts, there was no evidence against the man, and the DNA test results would take months, so the police kept looking for other clues. They soon received a strange tip. A local man named Donnie got drunk at a party and started bragging about having killed Crystal. They took him in for questioning, but he claimed to have no memory of the party and denied any involvement in the murder. The investigators later discovered that Donnie was an alcoholic and a known liar. Another witness reported seeing a black pickup truck with New Hampshire plates near Crystal's house, but this lead didn't lead anywhere either. One woman told the police that on the night of the murder, she was driving past Sarah's house when she heard sirens and thought they were for her boyfriend, who lived down the road. At the same time, she saw a car with high beams on, following her at high speed. Thinking the driver was chasing her, she turned onto another road, but the car passed her by. However, the police couldn't confirm if this car was somehow related to the murder. Since then, the police struggled to find any solid leads. Crystal's relatives pulled together $10,000 as a reward for any information on the case, and they also distributed flyers around town, hoping to attract new witnesses. It's worth mentioning that Teresa, the girlfriend of Crystal's ex-husband, was seen tearing down these flyers multiple times. As for the ex-husband himself, he was thoroughly investigated, but detectives eventually doubted his involvement. Over the years, his alcohol problems became even worse, and now Tom drank heavily every day. In his condition, it seemed unlikely he could have committed such a crime, and he had no clear motive. The police also looked into 2 other men Crystal dated after divorcing her husband, but they found no evidence linking them to the case. All of them, including Tom, provided DNA samples, leaving detectives waiting for the lab results. 9 months after the murder, investigators finally received the results, which showed that the blood and semen samples didn't match any of the suspects, including Dennis. This left detectives with no other leads. They requested Dennis's sample again for additional testing, but the results remained the same. Stuck in a dead end, investigators decided to revisit their only witness, Sarah. They still assumed that either she was lying to them or her mind had blocked out the horrific memories of her mother's murder, and she actually saw the killer at that time. Sarah was living with her aunt in Texas, so the police headed to the other end of the country to question her. They polygraphed her, but the operator didn't detect any false answers. Despite this, investigators continued talking to her day after day, asking the same questions, but each time, she replied that she didn't see the killer. After that, the case remained unsolved for several years. The police kept interviewing people, checking various suspects, but it yielded no results. In the late 90s, when the FBI DNA database became available, investigators uploaded the sample of Crystal's killer, but no matches were found. In 1999, a new detective was assigned to the case. He decided not only to review all existing evidence, but also to collect DNA samples from as many men as possible living in the town and nearby areas. By then, the laboratory could conduct tests much faster, and the police obtained hundreds of samples, but none of them matched. The new detective also reached out to Sarah and persuaded her to work with a psychologist to try to recover suppressed memories. She agreed, but the psychologist concluded that Sarah truly didn't remember anything and was telling the truth about not seeing the perpetrator. Since then, the case remained unsolved for many years. Detectives kept working on it, but couldn't find any new leads. This continued until 2006, when something unexpected happened. Detectives received a message. a DNA sample was entered into the FBI database, and it matched with the blood and semen left by Crystal's killer. The owner of the DNA turned out to be a man named Michael Hutchinson, who had never been a suspect in the case. Detectives found out that in 2003, he was arrested for assault and threats with a weapon, resulting in a 6-month prison sentence and 3 years of probation. At the time, his DNA sample was taken, but for some reason, it wasn't uploaded to the FBI database and remained stored in the lab. 3 years later, Michael was arrested for drunk driving with his children in the car. He was released on bail, but he didn't show up for his court hearing, so he was sent to prison. Michael was also arrested right at his own wedding and placed in a cell. His DNA sample was taken again, and this time, it was immediately uploaded to the database. Soon after, investigators in Crystal's case received a match. The detective called Sarah and informed her about this, but asked her to keep the information secret until the official charges were filed. He also asked if she knew this person, and Sarah said no. Considering that Michael was already behind bars, the detective began slowly building the case to ensure that the suspect had no chance of escaping punishment. He found out that at the time of the murder, Michael lived in Bridgeton, just 2 miles from Crystal's house. Michael, who was 19 at the time, lived near the Italian restaurant where Sarah called the police. He drove to his mother's house almost every day, which was just a little further away than Crystal's house, so Michael regularly passed by it. For the detective, it meant that he could have seen Crystal multiple times. Eventually, he went to see Michael in prison, but the man claimed to have no connection to the murder and said he never knew the victim. Considering that his DNA was found on her body and his blood was found at the crime scene, the detective didn't rush to believe him. While in prison, the detective noticed something interesting. Michael had a large scar on his palm, and as we recall, Crystal's killer likely cut his hand during the murder. Although in court, this could not be considered strong evidence, the presence of DNA was more than sufficient, so Michael was finally charged with murder. According to the prosecution, the man, a known user of illegal substances, had repeatedly seen Crystal as he passed by her house on that fateful night. He decided to assault her, and considering that he refused to confess, it was difficult to speculate on how exactly everything happened. But with the available evidence, the outcome was clear. Michael assaulted and killed her. During the trial, an explanation was also found for the fact that the killer managed to not leave a single fingerprint at the crime scene. The answer was quite unexpected. Michael worked as a bricklayer, and over time, people who have been engaged in this job begin to wear away the patterns on their palms, making it physically impossible for them to leave fingerprints on various surfaces. In his defense, Michael told his version of events. He said he met Crystal at a bar and they went back to her place, where they had consensual intercourse. At some point, an unknown man in a black motorcycle jacket burst into the house, knocked Michael out, and killed Crystal. When he regained consciousness, Michael tried to fight off the attacker, but the assailant injured him in the hand and fled. Michael himself also decided to leave the crime scene without any reasonable explanation. His story obviously seemed highly doubtful. The only shoe prints on the floor also belonged to him. If his story was true, the intruder would have had to take off his shoes before breaking into the house, and it still wouldn't have explained the absence of any other marks on the floor. Furthermore, there wasn't a single witness who saw Crystal at that bar. The trial ended on April 9, 2007, and Michael was unanimously found guilty. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole and remains in prison to this day. As for Sarah, her mother's murder undoubtedly had a critical impact on her. However, over the years, she found the strength to move forward. She attended college, became a writer, and published a book about her mother's murder, compiling all the available information. Moreover, when she was working on the book, Sarah managed to uncover new facts overlooked by the police. She discovered that during those years, Michael often borrowed his father's car, a black Ford pickup truck with New Hampshire license plates. As we recall, One witness reported seeing such a vehicle near Crystal's house. She also remembered the woman who told the police about the car with its high beams on, speeding past her on the night of the murder. At the time, the woman mentioned she mistook the ambulance sirens for police and thought they were heading to her boyfriend's house. That boyfriend was Michael. The police put his name in an address in the report, but back then, they decided there was no connection and didn't bother to investigate him further. Perhaps if the police had decided to speak with him, they would have noticed the cut on his hand and the case would have been solved much sooner. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sandra Cantu. Sandra Cantu was born on March 8, 2001 in Tracy, San Joaquin County. She grew up in Orchard Estates Mobile Home Park in Tracy, California, living with her mother, grandparents, and 3 older siblings. Although her parents, Maria and Daniel, were separated, the children remained close to their father through regular phone calls. Sandra was a friendly and outgoing child who made friends easily and was well liked by both kids and adults in the neighborhood. She loved playing outside with her friends. On March 27, 2009, Sandra returned home from school around 2 p.m. and was excited to share her day with her family. Later that afternoon, she went out to play with her friends in the neighborhood, as she usually did. Before leaving the house, Sandra changed into her favorite Hello Kitty top and black leggings and hugged her mother. When dinner time approached at 7 p.m., Sandra had not returned home, which made her mother, Maria, anxious. Maria tried calling some of Sandra's friends to see if she was with them, but no one had seen her. As her worries grew, Maria drove around the neighborhood, asking people if they had seen Sandra, but no one had seen her for hours. At 7:53 p.m., Maria made an urgent call to 911 for help. When Maria reported her daughter Sandra missing, the Tracy Police Department responded promptly to the mobile home park. They initiated a thorough search of the neighborhood, questioning Maria about Sandra's clothing at the time of her disappearance. Maria recalled that Sandra was last seen wearing a pink Hello Kitty shirt, black leggings, and Hannah Montana flip-flops. The police then conducted a door-to-door inquiry, speaking with neighbors to determine if anyone had seen Sandra or observed anything unusual in the area. They also displayed Sandra's picture to all residents. The officers demonstrated a high level of commitment to finding Sandra and identifying potential leads, evident in their meticulous questioning of neighbors and dissemination of Sandra's images in the hope of ensuring her safe return. On March 27th, the police were unable to find any trace of Sandra. The following day, March 28th, they sought help from the FBI, launching a massive search operation. This effort involved cadaver dogs, helicopters, and a large team of volunteers dedicated to finding the missing 8-year-old girl. Detectives also showed Sandra's photos to everyone in the area, hoping for any information about her whereabouts. Unfortunately, no one had any leads. The search for Sandra was a traumatic experience for the Tracy community. Dozens of local volunteers joined 230 professional search and rescue personnel from 16 different agencies to thoroughly search the town for any signs of her. The U.S. Coast Guard further assisted the aerial search over Tracy by deploying a C-13 military plane equipped with state-of-the-art cameras. Sandra's disappearance quickly gained widespread media attention. Authorities initially offered a $2,000 reward for information that could help locate her or uncover clues about her disappearance. As her case received significant media coverage, the reward amount was increased to $30,000. The search for Sandra, an 8-year-old Tracy girl, continues this morning. According to investigators, Sandra Cantu went missing after walking away from her home at the Orchard Estates Mobile Home Park in Tracy. One of the estimated 300 volunteers who joined the search over the weekend expressed their hope that Sandra would be found and returned to her family and friends. Sandra is a Hispanic girl, 4 feet tall, and weighs 45 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. Surveillance footage shows Sandra leaving the mobile home park around 4 p.m. and returning, but she was last seen walking away again. The key question is, where did she go that last time, and where is she now? The investigation is ongoing, and police urge anyone with information to contact Tracy authorities. Everyone searched for her, but no signs of her were found. Later, detectives examined the security camera footage installed by Sandra's grandfather. The recording showed Sandra leaving her house, heading to the park to play. When she returned, she seemed happy, skipping back home at 4 p.m. But instead of going inside, she suddenly turned and walked down the street towards one of the exits. The footage stopped at this point, leaving her next steps a mystery. This unexpected behavior was concerning, as Sandra usually followed safety rules about not leaving with strangers. The police suspected that someone or something familiar to her might have caught her attention. The investigators' initial suspect was Sandra's father, Daniel, due to his prolonged absence from her life, which was revealed during the police investigation. Additionally, they discovered that Daniel and Maria were engaged in a financial dispute related to custody issues. However, Maria assured the detective that despite their marital problems, Daniel would never be involved in Sandra's disappearance. According to Maria, Sandra had a strong bond with her father, and they got along well. The media later interviewed Daniel about his missing child. When asked for a statement, Daniel recounted receiving a call from his sister on Friday, informing him that Sandra was missing. He rushed to the scene and waited for a day before returning to work. Daniel stressed that the purpose of the interview was to shift the attention away from himself and onto the potential perpetrator, if there was one. He urged the detective to do their job to the best of their ability, emphasizing the need to focus on finding the real person behind Sandra's disappearance. A week after Sandra Cantu's disappearance, the 8-year-old girl's whereabouts remained unknown. In Tracy, authorities were pursuing hundreds of leads and increasing the reward for information about her. Investigators were combing through trash at the local landfill, searching nearby rivers, and looking into suspicious individuals, including residents of the mobile park and those seen in the area on March 27th. These individuals included an unknown ice cream vendor who had interacted with children in the neighborhood that day, and Frank Waller, a neighbor of the Cantu family who was rumored to be a pedophile. Frank had previously admitted to kissing Sandra on the lips 2 years earlier, claiming it was a friendly gesture. Despite the disturbing nature of his admission, the authorities ultimately cleared him as a suspect, though they made it clear they would keep a close eye on him. Meanwhile, the search for the real perpetrator continued, and the community rallied around Maria, showing her support and love during this tough period. At 8:30 p.m., neighbor Melissa discovered a disturbing handwritten note near a mailbox just miles from Sandra's family. It read, "Cantu locked in stolen suitcase thrown in water on Boucher Road and Whitehall Road." The note had obvious spelling mistakes, sparking questions. Was it real or meant to confuse the investigation? Melissa told FBI agents she didn't notice anyone or anything unusual when she found the note. She let them search her car, where they found a post-it note in the glove box with scribbled out words. The note was sent to experts for analysis. Following this discovery, they chose to release Melissa and shift their attention back to analyzing the original note found near the mailbox. Weeks went by, but authorities could not find any traces of Sandra. After 10 long days of searching for Sandra, her case took a shocking turn. The police chief told us that the person or persons responsible for the death of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu would be brought to justice. Sandra's death has devastated the community. Jose Luis Franco, a farm worker, found a locked black suitcase while draining a pond. The weight of the case sparked dread, and their fears were realized. Inside, Sandra's lifeless body was curled up, dressed in black leggings and a Hello Kitty shirt, with many cuts and wounds. A torn cloth was tied around her head, covered in blood, evoking shock and sorrow. Sandra's body was sent to undergo an autopsy to gather more information about her death. The results of the autopsy were devastating and added to the shock and horror surrounding her death. The autopsy revealed disturbing details. Sandra had been brutally assaulted, but there was no sign of any biological fluids. The injuries suggested that an unknown object had been used, and the cause of her death was asphyxiation. Furthermore, the coroner found a large amount of alprazolam in her system, indicating that she had been drugged. The official cause of death was recorded as homicide by asphyxiation. Sadly, it was discovered that she was murdered just hours after she was last seen on surveillance footage, a terrifying fact that sent shockwaves through the community. The description of the neighbor matched a woman named Melissa Huck. Investigators checked the CCTV camera at Sandra's house and confirmed that Melissa owned the same type of car. The footage showed Melissa getting into her SUV from a parking spot directly across the street from her house around 3:30 p.m. She drove towards her residence, which was located to the left of Sandra's house. Later, Melissa visited her grandparents' church before being seen by a resident near the pond at approximately 5:30 p.m. This timeline was surprising, as it established that Melissa was in the area around the time Sandra disappeared. The police had identified a prime suspect in the case, Melissa. They strongly believed she was the perpetrator and wanted to question her. However, when they approached her, they discovered that she had attempted to take her own life by swallowing razor blades. As a result, Melissa was hospitalized, and the police were forced to wait until she recovered before they could interrogate her. Once she was well enough, Melissa claimed to have no knowledge of the events surrounding the case and maintained that her only involvement was bringing the note to their attention. She told the officers that at 4 p.m. on the day Sandra was last seen, she had been at her church, decorating her classroom, and had not seen anything unusual in the area. The police unsurprisingly asked Melissa to confirm her alibi, which her phone records ultimately supported as crucial evidence. It turned out that Melissa had earlier called the police herself to report the theft of her suitcase from her driveway. She explained that after learning about Sandra's disappearance, she had even sent Maria a text message telling the police she had been robbed around 4 p.m., although she wasn't sure if that detail was significant. The stolen suitcase proved to be a crucial piece of evidence in the investigation. The black Eddie Bauer suitcase containing Sandra was identical to the one Melissa had reported stolen, which added to its significance. The note Melissa found not only mentioned a suitcase, but specifically referred to a stolen one. Although the authorities had gathered substantial evidence implicating Melissa, they sought additional information. They decided to wiretap her phone and waited patiently for her release from the hospital. 2 days later, when Melissa was discharged from the hospital, the police were stunned to discover that she had called the Canto family. During their conversation, Melissa invited one of Sandra's siblings to her home to play with her supposedly 5-year-old daughter. Responding to her residence immediately, the officers found no children inside, suggesting that Melissa might have been planning to lure another young victim into her house. A second neighbor has come forward with a disturbing revelation. Just before Sandra's disappearance, Melissa had taken a 7-year-old girl from the neighborhood to the park without her parents' permission. When the child returned, she was disoriented, slurred her speech, and had trouble walking. Her parents took her to the hospital, where tests revealed she had been drugged with benzodiazepines, the same drug found in Sandra's body. Although Melissa denied giving the girl drugs, the incident raised suspicions. As the investigation continued, the police grew increasingly suspicious of Melissa. They were shocked to learn about the drugged child. Soon after, they obtained a warrant to search Melissa's trailer and her grandparents' church. During the trailer search, they found a notebook with handwriting that exactly matched the note Melissa had claimed to have found on the ground. This discovery provided a crucial link between Melissa and the note, leaving the police stunned. Later, experts analyzing the post-it note found in Melissa's car's glove box made a stunning revelation. The note featured cryptic words, including Bache Road, Whitehall Road, and water, which added a mysterious layer to the ongoing investigation. Furthermore, they discovered alprazolam in Melissa's purse, a drug prescribed to her, which matched the substance found in Sandra's body. During the 2009 search of Clover Road Baptist Church, a blood-stained rolling pin was found with Sandra's DNA. A draw cord was missing from a window blind, and the cord used on the Eddie Bow suitcase matched the remaining church blinds. Melissa Huckabee, a 28-year-old Sunday school teacher, was arrested on April 10, 2009. Initially, she denied involvement, but later confessed, stating Sandra's death was an accident. She persuaded Sandra to enter a suitcase for a game with her daughter, and later found her lifeless body. Melissa claimed that she had played a game of hide-and-seek with Sandra, suggesting that Sandra hide in a suitcase and then jump out to surprise her own daughter and sister. Sandra allegedly agreed to the plan and zipped herself inside the suitcase. Melissa then said that she had forgotten Sandra was inside and didn't remember until she arrived at a church, where she opened the case to find Sandra unresponsive. In a panic, Melissa attempted to perform CPR and used a small wet towel to cool Sandra's forehead, but admitted she didn't know how to handle the situation. Later, Melissa got rid of the suitcase containing Sandra's body in a nearby pond. However, the investigators found that Melissa was not telling the truth when they looked into her personal life and discovered a history of criminal activity, depression, and other mental health issues. Melissa's legal history was well documented, and court records revealed that she pleaded no contest to felony second-degree commercial burglary and misdemeanor property theft charges on January 9th. A criminal complaint highlighted her prior convictions, including a 2006 property theft conviction that resulted in jail time in Los Angeles County. In November 2008, she was accused of attempting to steal from a store while on probation in San Juan County and had a scheduled court date. Melissa had also filed for bankruptcy in 2003, citing credit card debt and medical expenses. Melissa's father said she struggled with depression and finding her path after college. Her ex-husband confirmed her depression and self-image issues, but described her as carefree. They married in 2003, separated in 2004, and divorced in 2005, with Melissa getting full custody of their 5-year-old daughter. John Huckabee was shocked when he learned that his ex-wife Melissa was involved in the murder of a young girl. He couldn't believe it, saying it's not something you want to think anyone is capable of, especially someone you know and who is the mother of your child. After they separated, Melissa moved to Southern California to live with her parents, which made it difficult for John to see his daughter. During a past custody battle, Melissa had made accusations against John, claiming he was guilty of alcohol abuse and domestic violence, which he strongly denied. John, who had lost touch with Melissa for over 3 years, was now seeking custody of their daughter. He had started a new family, remarrying and having 2 more children. However, the idea of Melissa being involved in the rape and murder of a child seemed impossible to comprehend. At trial, Melissa Huckabee showed emotion when the judge announced her crimes. Throughout, prosecutor Thomas Testa argued Melissa had planned Sandra's murder. He showed surveillance footage of Sandra heading to Melissa's house. Testa claimed Melissa drugged Sandra with juice at a church, then waited for her to pass out before attacking and suffocating her. The prosecutor, Thomas Testa, initially intended to push for the death penalty in the case against Melissa Huckabee because she had not admitted to the horrific crimes. But a turning point came during the trial when Melissa suddenly decided to plead guilty, accepting full responsibility for what she had done. During the trial, Judge Linda Loftus of San Juan County Superior Court questioned Melissa Huckabee to ensure she understood the consequences of pleading guilty. Judge Loftus, asked Melissa if she had discussed the matter with her lawyers and if she was certain about giving up her right to a jury trial. Melissa affirmed that she had and reiterated her decision to plead guilty. After completing her questioning, prosecutor Thomas Testa expressed concerns about Melissa's mental health. He highlighted her unusual behavior in prison, including a recent incident where she attempted to harm herself, which raised questions about her ability to make rational decisions. Testa noted that Melissa appeared coherent and rational in court, but he was worried about her mental state in the long run. Melissa Huckabee's guilty plea was a pivotal moment in the case. By admitting her guilt, she brought some closure to the Cantu family, saving them from a long and painful trial. This significant development altered the course of the court proceedings and paved the way for what would happen next in Sandra's case. Melissa's guilty plea simplified the process and provided the Cantu family with some comfort after all they had endured since Sandra's tragic death. On June 14, 2010, Melissa Huckabee received a life sentence without parole for the first-degree murder and kidnapping of Sandra Cantu. The motivations behind Sandra's tragic death remain unclear. Prosecutors believed Melissa planned the crime to harm Sandra intentionally. Despite this, Melissa never disclosed her reasons, leaving investigators baffled. However, documents revealed a troubled individual with a history of depression, self-harm, and a difficult past. Melissa is now serving her life sentence at Sand County Jail, burdened by the gravity of her actions. Her imprisonment serves as a reminder that severe crimes have severe consequences. For the Cantu family, the pain of losing Sandra will never fully subside, but they find comfort in knowing justice has been served. The trial and conviction brought a sense of closure, ensuring Sandra's tragic death did not go unpunished. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jonathan Hoffman. Jonathan Hoffman was born in Michigan in 1994 to Jennifer and Michael Hoffman. His sister Jessica was born 3 years later, and from a very young age, the two siblings formed an unbreakable bond and shared a special connection that would last a lifetime. However, Jonathan's parents, Jennifer and Michael, faced significant struggles in their marriage, and their frequent fights often forced them to leave Jonathan and Jessica in the care of their grandmother, Sandra. Sandra, Jennifer's mother, played a crucial role in the lives of her grandchildren, providing a safe, loving, and nurturing environment for them. The children cherished the time they spent with their grandmother, who offered them a sense of stability in an otherwise tumultuous upbringing. In 2008, after years of turmoil, Jennifer and Michael divorced when Jonathan was a senior at Farmington Central High School. Following the divorce, Jennifer made the difficult decision to relocate the family from Michigan to Arizona. This move was particularly hard for Jonathan, who was forced to leave behind the only life he had ever known, including his friends, familiar surroundings, and the comfort of his childhood home. The situation rapidly deteriorated for Jonathan and his family after they moved to Arizona. Not long after their relocation, his younger sister Jessica fell critically ill. Medical tests revealed a tumor in her brain, prompting urgent surgery to remove it the very next day. Although the operation was a success, it entailed a lengthy convalescence, and Jessica spent an entire month recovering in the hospital. Throughout this period, Jennifer dedicated herself fully to her daughter's recovery, neglecting her own needs in the process. This left Jonathan feeling abandoned and lonely, forced to navigate the challenges of adolescence in a new state without the emotional support of his mother and sister. Recognizing the strain Jonathan was under, his grandmother Sandra reached out to Jennifer, deeply concerned about her grandson's well-being. Believing familiar surroundings and old friends would bring Jonathan solace, Sandra suggested he return to Michigan to live with her and her husband Fred. Jennifer worried whether her 74-year-old mother would be capable of caring for him, but Sandra reassured her that she was more than capable. 1 month after the Hoffman family's move to Arizona, Jonathan returned to Michigan and moved in with Sandra and Fred. The homecoming brought Jonathan immense joy and relief midway through his senior year of high school. Thrilled to be back among friends and family, he felt a sense of comfort and belonging he had missed in Arizona. His friends recall that Jonathan was initially shy, but once he opened up, he was a lot of fun and loved to make people laugh. With a zest for adventure, he was always up for trying new things. Although Jennifer deeply missed her son, she embarked on the journey to Michigan to spend 2 weeks with him. During her visit, she was dismayed to discover that Jonathan had been smoking marijuana. However, Jennifer viewed this as a typical phase of teenage experimentation and was confident it didn't involve harder substances. With a heavy heart, Jennifer bid farewell to Jonathan, confident that he would be in good hands with his grandmother. But little did she know, Jonathan was in grave peril, and it was at the hands of his grandmother, Sandra. On May 19, 2017, at 5:27 p.m., Jonathan Hoffman made a frantic 911 call, his voice trembling as he relayed to the dispatcher that his grandmother had shot him and he was dying. The dispatcher sprang into action, swiftly dispatching police and paramedics to Jonathan's residence. As she spoke to him, she tried to reassure him that help was on the way, her voice steady amidst the chaos and fear in his. Suddenly, an ominous silence fell on the line, and for a moment, the dispatcher feared the connection had been dropped, or worse, that Jonathan had succumbed to his injuries. But then, just as her heart sank, she heard a barrage of gunfire erupt from the phone, followed by a pained cry. Jonathan yelled, "Ow!" as his voice cracked with terror, telling the operator that his grandmother had shot him again. The West Bloomfield Township Police Department officers responded swiftly to the scene, arriving at Sandra Lane's house at 5:33 p.m. As they approached, the sound of gunfire echoed from within the residence. Trained to handle such situations, the officers didn't hesitate, taking necessary precautions to ensure their safety. They positioned themselves behind their patrol vehicles, using them as cover from their vantage point. Observing a woman moving inside the house, they issued clear, direct commands, ordering the individual to put their weapon on the ground. After a tense moment, the officers heard the sound of a gun being secured, and with the assurance that the person inside had put the firearm away, they entered the residence. When the police made it inside the home, they found 74-year-old Sandra Lane standing before them, a Glock 17 .40 caliber handgun at her feet. Sandra repeated several times in an eerily calm tone that she had murdered her grandson, stating the disturbing sentiment as fact. One of the police officers asked Sandra why she had killed her grandson, but she remained silent, offering no explanation. 2 minutes after the police arrived, Sandra was handcuffed and placed in the back of a patrol vehicle. Officers entered her home to find the victim, whom Sandra claimed was her grandson, 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman. Inside the home, the air was thick with smoke, making it difficult to see through the haze as they ascended the staircase. They reached the landing where Jonathan lay motionless, face down on the hardwood floor, dressed in gym shorts and socks. The young man's body was riddled with gunshot wounds to his upper torso. Despite the severity of his condition, the medics managed to detect a faint pulse. With urgency, Jonathan was rushed to Botsford Hospital, where a team of medical professionals worked tirelessly to stabilize his condition. However, their efforts ultimately proved futile, and after 30 minutes of intense medical intervention, he was pronounced dead. After the ambulance rushed Jonathan Hoffman to the hospital, police secured Sandra Lane's home as a crime scene. The 3-level residence was a labyrinth of violence and blood, with nearly every room telling a grim tale. Crime scene investigators arrived, meticulously combing the area for clues to unravel the shocking events. As they descended the basement staircase, they were struck by footprints in the blood-stained floor, crucial evidence carefully preserved. Deeper in the house, the team found 10 bullet casings scattered throughout, each one collected and analyzed. One investigator discovered a bullet hole in the drywall, and the search for more evidence led them to the second floor, where a gun case filled with ammunition was found. While gathering evidence, investigators took extra care to photograph Sandra, capturing her face, arms, and hands as she sat in the patrol car. Sandra became overwhelmed, tears streaming down her face. Amidst the chaos, Fred Lane, Sandra's husband, appeared outside the house with their dog, claiming to have been gone for an hour, a walk he took after Sandra asked him to. Fred was stunned to discover that his wife, Sandra Lane, had confessed to shooting and killing their grandson Jonathan after he was pronounced dead at the hospital. The police faced the daunting task of breaking the news to Jonathan's family that their beloved son had been murdered by his own grandmother. As detectives dug deeper into the case, they learned that Jonathan had been living in Michigan, separated from his parents and sister who resided in Arizona. When the detectives shared the devastating news with Jennifer, informing her that her mother had taken the life of her cherished son, she was left in a state of utter disbelief. It seemed unbelievable that someone who was supposed to love and care for their grandchildren could commit such an atrocity. The fact that Jonathan was his grandmother's favorite made the tragedy even more incomprehensible, leaving everyone wondering how he met his end at Sandra's hands. As the day drew to a close, around 7:30 p.m., the police decided to take Sandra Lane to the hospital for a health evaluation, given her advanced age. While waiting in the emergency room, Sandra maintained that Jonathan had never harmed her, describing him as a kind boy who never hurt anyone. After a medical assessment, the doctors cleared Sandra of any suspicious injuries. With this, the police decided to return her to the patrol car and take her to the police department for further questioning. On May 20th, after midnight, Sandra's attorney met her at the police station before she provided her official statement to the police. Seated alongside her attorney, Sandra sought legal counsel when the detectives eventually met with them. Sandra's story took a dramatic turn at the police station. Contradicting her initial statement at the hospital, where she had claimed her grandson was not involved, she now alleged that she and Jonathan had engaged in a heated altercation involving yelling and screaming. During this confrontation, Jonathan had kicked her in the stomach, leaving her fearing for her life. According to Sandra, Jonathan's behavior had become increasingly erratic and angry of late. He would come and go from her house at all hours, frequently bringing over people she didn't care for. Furthermore, Sandra had noticed that valuables had gone missing from her home, leading her to suspect that Jonathan or his friends might be involved in theft. Sandra also mentioned that her grandson had a history of run-ins with the law. Sandra stated that Jonathan was pulled over by an officer while driving, and cannabis was found in his car. However, this didn't deter him, and he was stopped again by an officer shortly after. This time, he was found to be in possession of Adderall. Sandra also recalled an incident where she had to call 911 due to Jonathan's aggressive behavior. During that episode, he was yelling obscene remarks at her. Despite this, when the police arrived, Sandra persuaded them not to arrest him. According to Sandra, she was compelled to buy a gun due to Jonathan's behavior. Sandra alleged that everything escalated on May 18th when she accompanied Jonathan to the probation department due to his non-compliance with his probation terms. After returning home, Sandra stated that Jonathan threatened to take her car, which led to him attacking her. Since there were no witnesses to Jonathan's shooting apart from Sandra, the detectives faced a significant challenge in verifying her account. Sandra claimed self-defense, prompting the detectives to conduct a thorough investigation into the incident. Their primary concern was ensuring they didn't wrongfully send a 74-year-old frail grandmother to prison for defending herself against a violent teenage boy. The detectives examined the photo taken by crime scene investigators immediately after Sandra confessed to shooting Jonathan. However, upon reviewing the evidence, they found no signs of violence on Sandra, not a single scratch, which would be expected if she had indeed been in a physical struggle. During her court arraignment, the judge ruled that Sandra should be held on bond while awaiting trial at the correctional facility. Paul Walton, the prosecutor on the case, believed the 911 call made by Jonathan clashed with Sandra's self-defense claim. Upon listening to the call, Walton noticed a significant 2-minute and 51-second silence before Sandra fired another shot at Jonathan. Based on his observations, it seemed clear that Jonathan was already severely injured and no longer posed an immediate threat to Sandra. However, Sandra's defense team presented a contrasting argument. They countered that Jonathan still posed a threat despite his injuries. The defense highlighted a portion of the 911 call where Sandra yells, "Let go," implying that Jonathan was still attacking his grandmother, even in his injured state. The defense argued that Sandra was simply an innocent and loving grandmother. They pointed to the end of the 911 call, where Sandra can be heard instructing her bleeding grandson to lie down and promising to get him water, as proof of her compassionate nature. According to the defense, these statements revealed Sandra's true character as a caring and empathetic woman. Prosecutor Walton was perplexed by Sandra Lane. Was she a doting grandmother forced to make the ultimate sacrifice in a desperate situation, or a ruthless killer who stalked her own grandson, callously ending his life in the woods? To uncover the truth, Prosecutor Walton conducted a series of interviews around town. The testimonies uniformly portrayed Sandra as an ordinary, kind-hearted grandmother. She regularly visited the local salon, actively participated in her synagogue, taught Sunday school, and volunteered her time. Her generosity and affluence were also well known. What struck the detectives most was the resoundingly positive feedback from those who knew Sandra. They described her as deeply devoted to her grandchildren, particularly Jonathan. The testimony seemed to starkly contradict the heinous act she had confessed to committing. However, a different narrative unfolded when the detectives spoke with Jennifer, Sandra's daughter, and Jonathan's mother. Jennifer offered a contrasting perspective on her mother's character, contradicting the image projected by the community. She described her mother as a controlling and abusive figure, vastly different from the warm and compassionate person others had portrayed. According to Jennifer, her childhood was marked by constant parental fighting, with her mother physically assaulting her on multiple occasions. Her father's frequent absences left Sandra in complete control of the household, allowing her to behave like a tyrant, prone to violent outbursts. Years later, when Sandra remarried Fred Lane, Jennifer witnessed a significant shift in her mother's behavior. Sandra expressed deep affection for Fred, believing him to be a stabilizing influence in their home. Initially, her controlling nature seemed to subside. However, after Jennifer gave birth to Jonathan, Sandra allegedly attempted to reassert her dominance. Jennifer claimed that her mother's obsession with the baby bordered on an unhealthy level, with Sandra becoming so fixated that Jennifer jokingly wondered if she wanted to kidnap the child. After Sandra was charged with murdering her grandson Jonathan, the community of West Bloomfield surprisingly rallied around her. A significant number of residents believed Jonathan was a drug user who got what was coming to him, sparking a wave of support for Sandra. On social media, community members posted messages of encouragement, affectionately referring to her as Granny and using the hashtag #GoGrannyGo. In this narrative, Jonathan was vilified as a monster, while Sandra was portrayed as an innocent, frail, elderly woman. Jennifer revealed that most of her family had bought into Sandra's self-defense story, effectively disowning both Jonathan's memory and herself. Throughout the ordeal, Sandra's husband Fred stood by her side, offering unconditional support. The medical examiner concluded that Jonathan Hoffman's death was a homicide resulting from the multiple gunshot wounds he suffered. An examination of the wounds revealed stippling, indicating that the gun was fired from varying distances. Additionally, a toxicology report revealed the presence of synthetic marijuana, also known as spice, or specifically K2, in Jonathan's system. At the time, spice was widely available in West Bloomfield, particularly among teens and young adults, who could purchase it at gas stations without identification. There were numerous reports of individuals experiencing adverse reactions to the substance, including violent behavior after consumption. 1 month prior to Jonathan's death, a disturbingly similar incident occurred involving another student from the same high school. Michael Cipriano, a classmate of Jonathan's, murdered his father, Robert, after a heated verbal argument. According to reports, Michael was under the influence of the synthetic drug Spice at the time of the attack. Jonathan's sister, Jessica, harbored a deep affection for her brother, but she was also aware of his emotional instability and occasional violent outbursts. Despite her reluctance to consider it, she couldn't shake the suspicion that her brother might have harmed their grandmother, leading her to ultimately shoot and kill him. 2 months after her arrest, Sandra was arraigned in circuit court and indicted on 2 additional charges: possession of a firearm and committing a felony. Furthermore, she faced a distinctive charge known as open murder, which is only applicable in select states such as Nevada and Michigan. This unique charge encompasses both first and second-degree murder. Prosecutor Paul Walton was concerned that the jury might hesitate to convict a grandmother of premeditated murder, so he opted to present the jury with a broader range of options. This decision displeased the defense, who felt that the prosecution was shirking their responsibility. In 2013, Sandra Lane faced trial for the murder of her grandson, sparking widespread national outrage. Many directed blame at the boy's mother, Jennifer, for sending him to Michigan to stay with Sandra. Throughout the trial, the defense portrayed Sandra as a devoted and loving grandmother, but the prosecution disputed her claim of self-defense. They presented telling images of Sandra taken after the shooting, highlighting inconsistencies. Her clothes remained unripped, her jewelry was still intact, and her hair was styled as usual. Moreover, bloody footprints found in the basement, matching Sandra's shoes, implied that she had searched for additional ammunition. After the prosecution rested its case, Sandra's defense team presented their argument to bolster their stance. Sandra's attorney took a calculated risk by allowing her to testify on her own behalf. The attorney believed it was crucial for the jury to hear directly from Sandra herself, giving a first-hand account of the experiences she had while living with her grandson Jonathan in the months leading up to his tragic death. According to Sandra, Jonathan had a history of violent outbursts, often kicking in doors and breaking objects. On one occasion, he even shattered a computer monitor. On the day of the incident that ultimately led to Jonathan's death, Sandra alleged that he struck her in the head, leaving her feeling threatened and terrified. As a result, she decided to retrieve her gun, hoping it would serve as a deterrent to protect herself. Her intention, as stated in her testimony, was not to take her grandson's life, but rather to stop him from getting back up and attacking her again. However, during cross-examination by prosecutor Paul Walton, Sandra's account began to unravel. Under Walton's pressure, Sandra conceded that her motivation for obtaining the gun was not fear for her safety, but rather a desire to get Jonathan to listen to her. This admission severely undermined her credibility as a witness and made it increasingly difficult to argue self-defense. Experts testified that the K2 spice found in Jonathan's urine at the time of his death suggested he was not under the influence of the drug when he died. The presence of the drug in his urine indicated that it had already been metabolized, casting doubt on Sandra's claim that Jonathan was high on the drug and violent. After hearing the evidence presented at the trial, the jury deliberated for 2 days before returning a guilty verdict for second-degree murder and the use of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Sandra was subsequently sentenced to 20 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Ann Wood. Sarah Ann Wood was born on March 4, 1981 in New York. Raised in a devout family, her father served as a pastor in a small town in the state's middle. From a young age, Sarah, along with her older sister and brother, attended services at her father's church and Sunday school. Dancing was her passion, poetry brought her joy, and she was an enthusiastic member of her school's cheerleading team. Sarah loved nothing more than riding her bike, often using it to get to her father's church, less than a mile from home, for services, Sunday school, or to lend her father a hand. On August 18, 1993, when Sarah was 12, she rode her bike to church for Sunday school, following her usual routine. With her father staying home, the classes were conducted by other church members. Her parents expected her to return immediately after the classes, but as time passed and she failed to appear, they grew increasingly anxious. After waiting a little longer, they headed to the church, thinking Sarah might have lingered behind with friends, but she was nowhere to be found. The Sunday school teachers reported that she had departed on her bike soon after classes, taking with her a few books, some colorful folders, and a small display board. Her parents' concern escalated because the ride home from church should have taken only a few minutes, and it was unlikely Sarah would have gone elsewhere with all those items. Moreover, she always sought permission before deviating from her routine. Her parents retraced the route to the church, inquiring with neighbors if anyone had seen their daughter, leveraging the small town's familiarity and Sarah's father's church connections. Dozens of people quickly joined the search, and they soon found a witness who had seen Sarah riding towards her house around 2:30 p.m., just a few hundred yards from her home. This sighting only intensified her parents' anxiety, convinced that something had indeed happened to Sarah, prompting them to contact the police. The local police department swiftly launched a search operation, deploying dozens of officers to scour the area. The sheriff also requested assistance from the fire department, and they joined forces to aid in the search. News of Sarah's disappearance spread rapidly throughout the community, prompting dozens of volunteers to join the effort. Within the first few hours, several hundred people were involved in the search. The police concentrated on the route from the church to Sarah's home, meticulously searching the fields and woods on both sides of the road. Their efforts soon yielded a disturbing discovery. Just a few yards into the woods, they found Sarah's bike leaning against a tree. The police centered their focus on that area and quickly uncovered the items Sarah had brought from Sunday school, hidden beneath a nearby bush. These findings led investigators to a grim inference. It was likely that Sarah had been abducted. They theorized that an unknown assailant might have dragged her from the road into the woods, left her belongings behind, and then taken her away in a vehicle. The police department launched an all-out search effort, pouring all its resources into finding Sarah. Meanwhile, her restless relatives took matters into their own hands, printing flyers with details of her disappearance and distributing them not only in their hometown, but also in surrounding cities, with the help of dozens of volunteers. Despite their collective efforts, the first day's search yielded nothing. Police and volunteers scoured the area within a several-mile radius of the road until nightfall, but no new leads emerged. The search resumed the next morning, with even more people joining the effort. The state police also joined the investigation, focusing on identifying a potential suspect. Investigators questioned every resident in town, hoping someone might have spotted a suspicious stranger or vehicle linked to Sarah's disappearance. Sarah's parents set up an improvised headquarters, manned by dozens of volunteers, who printed and distributed flyers, scouring for witnesses or leads that could bring them closer to finding Sarah. As local media picked up the story, news of her disappearance spread nationwide within days. The police received over 1,000 tips, meticulously investigating each one, but repeatedly hit dead ends. Concerned residents helped the parents raise a substantial $150,000 reward for any information about Sarah's whereabouts. But unfortunately, this too yielded nothing. The active phase of the search continued for about a week, before the police concluded they were unlikely to find valuable leads in the area. They shifted their focus to finding a potential suspect, scrutinizing local residents and convicted criminals from neighboring towns, but to no avail. Sarah's disappearance was featured on 2 popular national television shows, triggering a new wave of tips. Her parents made regular appeals to the public through the media, pleading for any information about their daughter's whereabouts, but her fate remained a mystery. This continued for nearly 6 months until a surprising breakthrough occurred. On the morning of January 7, 1994, 12-year-old Rebecca left her home in a small Massachusetts town and set out on her walk to school. As she strolled down a deserted street, she noticed a man walking alongside her. He attempted to speak, but Rebecca couldn't hear him due to her headphones. When she removed them, the man brandished a gun and warned her that if she obeyed his every command, he wouldn't harm her. He grasped her jacket, and they continued walking in the same direction. Rebecca was terrified to scream or attempt to flee, aware that even if she complied, the man might still kill her. As they walked, she quickly devised a plan. Feigning an asthma attack, she struggled to breathe and sat down on the ground. The man released her jacket, instead gripping the edge of her backpack as she continued to act as if she were suffocating. Seizing the moment, Rebecca slipped out of the backpack straps and sprinted away from her kidnapper. A few hundred yards away, she spotted several adults and rushed towards them, exclaiming that someone had just attempted to abduct her. Meanwhile, the kidnapper sped away in his car, taking Rebecca's backpack with him. One of the witnesses took it upon himself to tail the kidnapper in his own vehicle. After a few minutes, the witness pulled over at the nearest gas station and alerted the police. The witness was able to provide a partial license plate number and the car's model, while Rebecca gave a detailed description of the kidnapper's appearance. The police promptly launched a search for the vehicle, scouring databases for matching cars. They also sent out alerts to neighboring towns, and their efforts were rewarded that very evening. A patrol officer driving through a nearby small town spotted a vehicle matching the description. He pulled over and knocked on the door of the house where it was parked. Inside, he found several people, and upon inquiring about the pickup truck, the owner explained that he hadn't driven it in a while due to his loss of sight. He revealed that his neighbor, 43-year-old Louis Lint, frequently borrowed the truck. Louis, a handyman, assisted his blind neighbor with various household tasks in exchange for using the pickup truck. According to Louis, he last drove the truck the previous day and hadn't used it since. Nonetheless, the officer asked him to come to the station for questioning, and Louis complied. Despite his earlier denial, Louis continued to insist that he hadn't used the pickup that day and had no involvement in the attempted abduction. He claimed to be a devout Christian who spent most of his free time at church and would never engage in such an act. While Louis was at the station, the police took his photograph and presented it to Rebecca and other witnesses in a photo lineup alongside pictures of other men. Unanimously, they identified Louis as the kidnapper. Investigators promptly obtained a warrant to search Louis's house and the vehicles, including the pickup truck owned by his neighbor. Their search yielded a disturbing discovery: a small bag containing duct tape, a knife, children's sunglasses, and candy in Louis's van, which was parked near their house. Additionally, the police found a gun and Rebecca's backpack inside the house. Investigators uncovered a shocking discovery: a large, secret room dug out beneath the house, still under construction. With this substantial evidence, the police arrested Louis for the attempted abduction. Initially, he maintained his innocence, but soon decided to confess to everything. He admitted to traveling to Rebecca's town in search of a victim, bringing along his kidnapping bag that he always kept in his car. Louis then explained the purpose of the secret room he was digging under his house, and his story left even the police stunned. He revealed that he planned to convert it into a fully equipped bunker where he intended to hold kidnapped victims captive. Lewis confessed to aiming to abduct 11 girls between the ages of 12 and 17 to satisfy his horrific fantasies. He added that until the room was completed, he didn't plan to keep his victims there for long, intending to kill them within a few days. In Lewis's house, the police also found a list of several names. Upon identifying these individuals, they realized they were all children living in close proximity to Lewis's home. Following his confession, Lewis was placed in jail awaiting trial for attempted abduction. Investigators continued to visit him to gather additional information, and during one of these visits, he unexpectedly confessed to another crime. Lewis revealed that 4 years prior, in October 1990, he was working as a janitor at a movie theater in the same town where he later attempted to kidnap Rebecca. On the evening of October 22nd, he left work and spotted 12-year-old James Bernardo riding his bike near the parking lot. Lewis instantly decided to abduct him, intending to assault him. Lewis offered James $5 to help set up chairs in the movie theater, and the boy agreed. Lewis led him to the empty theater where he bound him. He then drove his van closer to the entrance, dragged the boy and his bike inside, and took him to his home. He left the boy there and drove to a nearby lake to dispose of the bike by throwing it into the water. Lewis returned home and attempted to assault the boy, but was unsuccessful. Frustrated, he decided to dispose of the victim. He dragged him into his van and drove to a neighboring state, where he murdered the boy and left the body in the forest. A hunter soon discovered the body and reported it to the police. However, despite their efforts, detectives were unable to identify the culprit over the course of several years. Now, upon comparing Lewis's statement with the case materials, investigators discovered that he had provided an astonishing number of facts and details about the crime that perfectly mirrored reality. Following Lewis's confession, news of his case spread like wildfire throughout the country. Within just a few days, police realized they were dealing with a man who not only had attempted to abduct a girl and was building a secret bunker for other victims, but had also confessed to a murder that no one had suspected him of. New York investigators searching for Sarah Wood soon caught wind of Lewis's case. They delved into the details of Rebecca's attempted abduction and requested more information about Lewis himself. Interestingly, profilers had previously created a profile of Sarah's potential abductor, and Lewis seemed to fit it remarkably well. The investigators decided to pay him a visit and headed to the prison. During the interrogation, he revealed that frequent visits to the neighboring state were motivated by close family ties. Lewis also admitted that he would often drive through small towns in search of victims, and on August 18, 1993, he spotted Sarah walking along the road with her bike. According to his statement, he pulled up beside her, got out of the car, and forced her into the van at gunpoint. He then tied her up, dragged her belongings and bike into the nearby woods to conceal them, and drove her hundreds of miles to the mountains. In a remote area by a large lake, he assaulted and killed her, eventually burying her body in a hole. The police launched an extensive search effort around the lake, mobilizing hundreds of volunteers, park rangers, and the military. However, the vast size of the lake posed a significant challenge, making it nearly impossible to cover the entire area, even with such a large search team. Furthermore, with months having passed since the burial, the location could have become overgrown with vegetation. After weeks of searching, they were unable to find either the body or any evidence. Detailed testimony with precise details of the abduction was sufficient to charge Lewis with the murders of both Sarah and 12-year-old James. In January 1995, Lewis was sentenced to 17 to 20 years in prison for the attempted abduction of Rebecca. The following June, the trial for James's murder began, and Lewis pleaded guilty before the judge. He confided in his lawyer that he wanted to confess to Sarah's murder immediately, but when he entered the courtroom and saw her parents, he abruptly changed his mind. However, just 9 days later, when he was brought into an empty courtroom, he finally admitted his guilt. Despite this, he persisted in refusing to disclose the burial site, ignoring the desperate pleas from Sarah's parents. The prosecution offered Lewis a deal in exchange for information about Sarah's whereabouts. In return, they promised to serve his sentence in a state prison instead of a federal prison, as Lewis had requested. He agreed and began collaborating with investigators. Lewis identified a specific area near the lake and even sketched a rough map. Although the police wanted to take him along on the search, his lawyer cautioned against it. Undeterred, the police organized extensive searches in this area, braving the snow and freezing temperatures, with the help of hundreds of volunteers and heavy equipment. Despite their efforts, they were still unable to find Sarah. Several months later, with autumn's arrival, the police launched another attempt, but it ultimately proved unsuccessful. Throughout this period, detectives endeavored to extract more specific information from Lewis, but he persistently refused to divulge the exact location or assist the police in their search. Eventually, the prosecution opted to revoke the deal, and on April 11, 1997, Lewis was sentenced to 25 years in prison, the maximum sentence the judge could impose without the discovery of the body. The judge added that if such evidence were available, he would have certainly handed down a death sentence. During the trial, Lewis's lawyer attempted to mitigate the punishment in all three cases without disputing his client's guilt. He argued that Lewis suffered from an unidentified mental disorder, citing claims of hearing voices in his head and alleged protection by aliens. However, experts found no evidence of any mental disease and concluded that Lewis was likely feigning these symptoms to avoid severe punishment. After the verdict, detectives persisted in visiting Lewis in prison, hoping to coax him into revealing Sarah's burial site. His behavior was erratic, and he provided contradictory information, naming different locations. On one occasion, he claimed he wasn't ready to disclose the location because he had buried Sarah alongside another victim, and he didn't want anyone to uncover the identity of this other person. Despite the emotional pleas of Sarah's parents, who also visited Lewis in prison, he remained resolute in his silence. The detectives were also exploring Lewis's potential involvement in other unsolved cases. Having confessed to the abductions of Sarah and James, the police had little doubt that he had additional victims. Almost immediately after his arrest, they uncovered another attempted abduction he had made several years prior. Lewis had tried to grab a girl off the street, but her father intervened, and they reported the incident to the police, although detectives couldn't identify the perpetrator until Lewis's photo appeared in the news. Lewis was also suspected of being involved in 4 unsolved disappearances between 1985 and 1992, and investigators concluded that he had the capability to commit these crimes, but no evidence was found, and Lewis refused to confess. Despite this, his story didn't end there. Detectives continued to visit him after his sentencing, hoping he would reveal Sarah's whereabouts or confess to other crimes. However, it wasn't until 2013 that Lewis suddenly had a change of heart and confessed to another murder. He admitted to being responsible for one of the crimes he was suspected of. According to Lewis, on November 6, 1992, he abducted a 16-year-old teenager with developmental disabilities who was riding a bike to his grandmother's house. He claimed to have forced the boy into his van, then killed him and dumped his body in a lake. Investigators confirmed his involvement based on his detailed description of the events, although official charges in the case have yet to be filed against him to this day. Currently, Lewis is 73 years old and remains incarcerated for 2 murders and an attempted abduction. Sarah's parents hold on to the hope that they will eventually persuade him to reveal the location of her burial site, or that he will divulge this secret before his death. In memory of Sarah, her relatives also organize an annual bike ride. Initially attended by just a few people, the event has grown steadily, with several thousand participants now regularly taking part. This event also helps raise significant funds to support efforts to locate missing children. The police are determined to find Sarah's burial site and are not giving up, even if Lewis is not willing to help them. They will keep searching the areas he has pointed out until they locate her body. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Athena Strand. Athena Strand was born on May 25, 2015, in Duncan, Oklahoma, a small American town. Following her parents' divorce, her father relocated to Texas, while Athena remained with her mother in Oklahoma. Despite the distance, her father maintained regular contact, visiting her frequently, and her mother also made sure Athena spent quality time with him, given their amicable relationship. Later, both her parents remarried, and Athena gained two younger sisters, with whom she shared a strong bond, always seeking to spend as much time with them as possible. Athena was a cheerful child, always exuding positivity, with a passion for outdoor play and exploration. In late 2022, at the age of 7, she temporarily relocated to live with her father in Texas until the New Year holidays, after which she would return to her mother in Oklahoma. During her time in Texas, Athena attended a local elementary school. Her father's rural home, surrounded by woods and fields, provided the perfect setting for her to bond with her dad and his new wife, Elizabeth, in the beauty of nature. On November 30th, Athena returned home from school around 4:15 p.m., just like any other day. With her father and grandfather out hunting, she was left alone with Elizabeth. But that evening, Athena's mood was off, leading to an argument with Elizabeth. Upset, Athena retreated to her room, while Elizabeth headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner. 20 minutes later, Elizabeth went to call Athena for dinner, but she was nowhere to be found. Elizabeth searched the entire house and yard, but there was no sign of the girl. She then called her husband's relatives who lived nearby, but they claimed they hadn't seen Athena. Elizabeth then called her husband, explaining the situation, and he immediately told her to contact the police and rushed home. At 6:40, Elizabeth dialed 911, and officers arrived within 14 minutes. She recounted the events and shared her theory that Athena might have run away due to their argument. However, the girl's relatives remained skeptical, given Athena's age of 7 and her history of never straying far from home, especially at night when she was afraid of the dark. Initially, the police viewed Elizabeth with skepticism, primarily due to the 40-minute delay in reporting her child missing after realizing she was gone. However, after listening to her detailed account of searching the entire house and contacting relatives, they concluded that she was likely telling the truth. The officers promptly launched a search of the surrounding area, undeterred by the darkness, and meticulously combed through the forests and fields within a several-kilometer radius of the house. They focused their search on the area around the house, thinking Athena might have wandered off and got lost in the darkness, based on their main theory. While they also looked into the possibility of her being abducted, they didn't find any evidence to support this, since there was no sign of forced entry. Elizabeth didn't report hearing any noises or screams, and the neighbors didn't see anything suspicious that evening. Athena's relatives and concerned townspeople assisted the police in their search efforts. As soon as Athena's mother heard about her daughter's disappearance, she rushed to the scene. The search continued until almost 5 a.m., but they failed to find any signs of Athena. The area around the house, especially during dark hours, was difficult to access, which complicated the search. At 7 a.m., the police resumed their search, this time with more officers. As news of Athena's disappearance spread throughout the county, hundreds of volunteers joined the effort. Some volunteers searched the area on horseback and ATVs, while the police used drones and helicopters equipped with thermal cameras. Despite their efforts, Athena remained missing by the end of the day. The police were increasingly concerned for her life, given the onset of winter and the 50 degrees Fahrenheit temperature in Texas, which would have been challenging for Athena, who was wearing light clothing. On the third day, the police broadened their search to a radius of miles around the house, suspecting a potential criminal element in Athena's disappearance. Despite initial doubts that she had wandered off, they grew more convinced that she hadn't left the house voluntarily. Over the next few days, they scoured the surrounding area in all directions, covering several miles, but found no trace of the girl, as it seemed unlikely she could have walked that far without encountering anyone. Investigators sought to identify those near Athena's house that evening, a challenge due to the secluded location. However, they soon got a break. A courier service had delivered a package that same evening. FedEx led them to the responsible organization and the specific van, which was equipped with cameras, providing key surveillance footage. After rewinding the footage to the time when the van arrived at the house, investigators uncovered disturbing evidence. The footage showed the driver, later identified as 31-year-old Tanner Horner, pulling a girl who looked like Athena into the vehicle. The police promptly apprehended Tanner at his address on suspicion of abduction and took him in for questioning. Tanner confessed to delivering a package to Athena's house that evening. He hit her with his van while backing up, but she was conscious and uninjured. Athena told him her name, and they conversed. Panicked, Tanner put her in his van, unsure what to do. When Athena said she'd tell her father, Tanner's anxiety grew, fearing legal consequences if she told adults about the accident. After that, Tanner's bizarre confession left the investigators perplexed. He claimed that, in his words, killing her seemed the only viable option. First, he attempted to break her neck, but it didn't work, so he resorted to strangling her. Then, he transported her body to a nearby river and discarded it in the water. The police were naturally skeptical of this account, but Tanner provided them with the exact location where he had left Athena's body. They immediately went to the site and indeed found her remains. The news of the young girl's brutal murder sent shockwaves throughout the country, leaving her relatives and thousands of others stunned. As the case garnered widespread media attention, the public was horrified by the sheer cruelty of the crime. After the body was found, Tanner was charged with abduction and murder. As detectives awaited the medical examiner's report, they delved deeper into the criminal's identity, seeking to understand his motives. Tanner's version of events seemed utterly far-fetched. He claimed to have lightly struck the girl with his van, causing no serious harm. Yet, he was allegedly so terrified that he immediately decided to kill her, fearing that hitting a child without causing harm might only lead to his job loss. His story appeared highly improbable. Tanner, engaged with a year-old child, worked as an Uber driver and musician, performing in Fort Worth cafes. His social media showed a normal life, with photos of his child and musical performances. With no prior legal issues, there was no indication he was capable of cruel violence. 2 months prior to Athena's tragic death, the delivery man had shared photos on social media, showcasing heartwarming moments spent with his son and grandparents. The wait for the medical examiner's report, which was anticipated to clarify the exact sequence of events, dragged on for several weeks. During this time, Athena's grief-stricken parents took legal action against FedEx and the contracting company, alleging that they had failed to implement adequate employee screening measures, hence allowing Horner to continue working and paving the way for such a heinous crime. A devastating twist in this tragic tale emerged. The package Horner had delivered on that fateful evening was, in fact, a Christmas gift for Athena, a Barbie doll she had long coveted, which her parents had ordered for her. As the medical examiner's findings were made public, even more questions surfaced in the case. According to the document, the victim's death occurred within an hour of her abduction, with her body showing injuries of varying severity. The cause of death was asphyxiation. Initially, detectives believed that the killer, Horner, had abducted the girl to sexually assault her after spotting her near the house. However, medical experts found no evidence to support this theory, which puzzled the police. The detectives didn't believe the killer's account of events, as it lacked a logical explanation. They speculated that the perpetrator's initial plan was to sexually assault the girl, but something went awry. One theory is that after arguing with her father's wife, the victim went outside and was in the yard when Horner arrived to deliver a package. Noticing the girl alone and isolated, he saw an opportunity to act on his depraved fantasies. Horner could have lured the girl into his van through deception or attacked her to put her in the vehicle without a struggle. What happened next is unclear, with two main theories emerging. It's possible that Horner had planned to abduct the girl and take her far away from the house to commit his intended crimes. However, she may have started screaming or tried to escape, fearing capture, which led him to kill her. Afterwards, he dumped her body in the river. According to an alternative scenario, Horner might have engaged in inappropriate behavior towards the victim without physically touching her. In this case, a medical examination would not have revealed any evidence of sexual assault. The detectives stumbled upon an unexpected clue suggesting a sexual motive behind the crime. What was unusual about Horner was that he had no prior criminal record, which is rare in most cases. Typically, people who are capable of murder start with less severe crimes. The detective spent weeks meticulously investigating Horner's past, speaking to his relatives, friends, and acquaintances to uncover any hints of potential involvement in other crimes. Eventually, they made a breakthrough. The police identified several individuals who alleged they were victimized by Horner during their childhood. To protect the investigation, the authorities did not release the victims' identities or disclose full details of the incidents. However, it is known that one of the victims accused Horner of assaulting her 9 years prior. Additionally, he was charged with 3 counts of sexual assault involving minors in 2013, although it is unclear whether these incidents involved one or multiple victims. One of Horner's victims had been publicly sharing her story for years, describing how he assaulted her when she was 16. She used social media to raise awareness about Horner's criminal nature, but despite this, he faced no consequences and was not considered a suspect. The victim stated that for years, nobody believed her allegations. However, after Horner killed Athena, these allegations gained significant attention, revealing Horner's true character and possible motives. Horner faces multiple trials, including Athena's murder. A disturbing TikTok video shows him watching a bug being killed with a spray, his face showing an unsettling pleasure. This hints at sadistic tendencies, making his account of Athena's murder even more suspicious. Horner claimed he killed Athena to avoid punishment for a lesser crime, but this excuse seems absurd given his sadistic nature. Authorities are seeking the death penalty, backed by video footage and Horner's own test. We're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Paige Bergfeld. After high school, Paige attended the University of Florida's nursing school, where she met Howard Bigler. They started dating after realizing their mutual feelings for each other. After graduating with a nursing degree, Paige returned to Colorado to live with her family. In 1995, she and Howard got married. At first, they seemed like a happy couple, sharing many common interests and views. However, they had a significant disagreement that eventually led to their divorce. Paige wanted to have a child and start a family, but Howard didn't share her desire. This issue caused frequent arguments and discussions, but they couldn't find a compromise. In 1997, they decided to divorce. Despite this, they remained friends due to their strong connection. Paige later married Rob Dixon, but that marriage also ended in divorce. After her second divorce, Paige reconnected with Howard. He claimed to be one of the last people to see her alive. On the 28th, Howard and Paige, who were previously married, met in Eagle County, Colorado, to attend to personal matters. They spent Thursday together, after which they returned to their separate homes. Following their meeting, they continued to stay in touch through phone calls. Later, when Paige went missing, Howard quickly reached out to emergency services to report his concerns. During the call, he expressed his deep worry and belief that something terrible might have happened to her. Howard mentioned that Paige was a devoted mother who would never abandon her children without a valid reason. A recording of the call confirmed this, and cell tower data verified that Howard was in the Denver, Colorado area on the day Paige disappeared, which is a significant distance from where she was last seen. This evidence led the police to rule Howard out as a suspect. The investigation then focused on Paige's relationship with her second husband, Rob Dixon, and uncovered several suspicious incidents that required further investigation. Paige had previously reported her husband Rob to the police twice for harassment during their marriage. Before marrying Rob, Paige worked at a strip club in Denver, where she met him. Rob came from a wealthy family and had inherited a significant fortune. The two fell in love and got married in 1998. The couple settled in a luxurious home in Colorado, where Paige realized her dream of becoming a mother. Within a few years, they had 3 children who became the center of Paige's life. The early years of their marriage seemed happy, with the couple enjoying a luxurious lifestyle. However, things took a turn for the worse due to Rob's financial difficulties. Rob's family businesses faced severe issues, leading to a significant decline in their economic situation. As a result, Rob was forced to file for bankruptcy, which triggered a deep family crisis. By 2004, tensions had escalated to the point where Paige called emergency services twice. The first time, she reported that Rob had threatened to kill her and their children, but when the police arrived, they claimed to have resolved their issues. A year later, Paige reported Rob for assaulting her while she was holding their youngest child. Rob was arrested and charged with third-degree assault. He eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of molestation, but the trial was dismissed and he avoided jail time. The couple's relationship continued to deteriorate, leading them to separate. Rob then moved to Pennsylvania. During the investigation into Paige's disappearance, Rob was interviewed to establish his alibi for that day. He claimed to have been at home and could not have harmed her. The investigators could not find any evidence to implicate Rob in her disappearance. In fact, Rob actively participated in the search for Paige. The investigating officers left no stone unturned in their effort to find clues and solve the mystery of the missing mother. The investigation into Paige's disappearance began with a thorough examination of her car. It was hoped that evidence in the car could help locate her or provide clues about what had happened. Sergeant Weiler of the County Sheriff's Department noted that arson is often used to destroy evidence, but in this case, the examination of the vehicle yielded valuable information. The driver's seat was found to be pushed back as far as it would go, indicating that the last person to drive the car was a tall individual, inconsistent with Paige's short stature. The trunk of the car contained Paige's notebook, with pages torn out from June 26 to June 29. As time passed, the search for Paige became increasingly urgent. A break in the case came when a driver stopped on a highway southeast of town to fix a flat tire and discovered a checkbook lying nearby. He reported it to the authorities, who then searched the area and found additional items belonging to Paige, including medical records and insurance cards. Sergeant Weiler's investigation into Paige Bergfeld's disappearance took a dramatic turn when he found a business card on the road, leading him to a shocking discovery. Paige was secretly working as an escort under the alias Carrie. This revelation completely upended the investigation, as it revealed a side of Paige's life that her loved ones knew nothing about. Previously, it was believed that Paige was a devoted mother who worked hard to provide for her children after her divorce. She had started her own children's clothing business, taught dance lessons, and sold kitchen supplies. Despite her busy schedule, she always made time for her children and was actively involved in their school activities. However, the discovery of the secret phone Paige used for her escort work revealed a completely different picture. This phone became a crucial piece of evidence, leading police to unravel a complex mystery that was far more sinister than anyone had initially suspected. The investigation into Paige's disappearance led to more questions than answers. What prompted a responsible mother and successful businesswoman to lead a secret life? And how was this double life connected to her vanishing? These questions took center stage in the investigation, adding a new layer of mystery. To get to the bottom of things, detectives analyzed Paige's cell phone, found in her car, and examined her contacts and calls from the hours leading up to her disappearance. The last call made from her phone was on June 28th around 9 p.m. This analysis led investigators to identify 7 suspects, one of whom was Lester Ralph Jones. Jones's criminal record raised red flags, particularly his history of violence against women and a previous kidnapping conviction that earned him a 5-year prison sentence. However, it wasn't the only concerning aspect. Jones's white car matched the description of the vehicle seen by Carol, Paige's friend. Carol shared a crucial detail with detectives. Paige had once approached her car, only to find a white car blocking her driveway. Enraged, Paige got behind the wheel to turn around, but the cars collided. The unknown driver quickly fled the scene. Investigators suspected that Lester might have been obsessed with Paige and was stalking her after discovering that he had tried to book an appointment with her for intimate services on the day before she vanished. When questioned, Lester denied any involvement in her disappearance and provided fingerprints and DNA samples. However, a search of his home turned up several incriminating items, including a prepaid phone, wigs, Viagra, a sheet with an escort services phone number, and women's lingerie in various sizes. The prepaid phone caught the investigators' attention due to suspicious calls made to Paige's phone on the day she disappeared. Lester initially denied owning a second phone, which proved to be a lie. Using the phone's packaging found at his home, police traced the purchase to a supermarket on North Avenue. The store's security footage showed Lester buying the phone, which he refused to acknowledge when confronted with the evidence. Lester Jones became the main suspect in Paige's disappearance, but the police couldn't find enough concrete evidence to charge him. They continued to investigate and search for Paige's body, hoping to find proof of his guilt. However, the case stalled for several years, leaving Paige's family and loved ones in a state of unbearable grief. As time passed, the search seemed increasingly futile, and the hope of finding Paige alive began to fade. In 2012, a hiker stumbled upon human remains in a ravine in Delta County, surprisingly close to where Paige's personal belongings had been found 5 years prior. Investigators were nearly certain the body was that of a young mother, and DNA testing confirmed it was indeed Paige. Unfortunately, her story ended in tragedy. The condition of the body made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, but it was clear she had suffered a brutal beating with multiple broken bones, particularly in her face. It was concluded that her injuries ultimately led to her death. The discovery of Paige's body added a horrific layer to the story. It's believed that her body was buried, but years of soil erosion eventually brought it to the surface, which may explain why it wasn't found sooner. The discovery led to a breakthrough in Lester Ralph Jones's case, which had stalled for years. In November 2014, he was charged with kidnapping, first-degree murder, and second-degree murder. The trial finally began in July 2016 and lasted 22 days. Prosecutors claimed that Lester's frustration over being unable to see Paige, combined with his history of violence against women, motivated the crime. The prosecution's key witness, Lester's ex-wife Lisa, testified about his violent past. She described how Lester kidnapped and threatened to kill her at gunpoint in the late 1990s after she ended their relationship. On one occasion, he attacked her and her partner, shooting the latter in the head. A month later, Lester made another threat, warning her that she would be thrown into a lake. Lisa managed to escape and contacted the police, leading to Lester's arrest on charges of kidnapping and assault. In contrast, Lester's defense attorneys argued that the police had wrongly accused an innocent man and suggested that other clients of Paige's may have had motives for the crime. However, they failed to provide convincing evidence linking anyone else to the murder. Lester's current wife testified, stating that although her husband used an escort service, her faith prevented her from leaving him. Nevertheless, she could not provide an alibi for him and identified him in a supermarket surveillance video where he bought a disposable phone. Lester's first trial ended in a mistrial on September 9, 2016, when the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict. However, the district attorney was convinced of Lester's guilt and continued to investigate and re-examine the evidence. After several weeks, on November 21, 2016, the jury finally reached a verdict, finding Lester guilty of all charges related to Page's death. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Lester's defense team appealed the sentence, but an appeals court panel upheld the conviction and sentence in June 2022. Page's funeral was held on April 28, 2012. Her obituary remembered her as a beautiful and radiant woman with a smile that lit up the room. Her tragic death has had a lasting impact on her family and friends, leaving her 3 children without their loving mother and support. The tragic case of Page captured the nation's attention and spanned many years, but through the unwavering dedication of law enforcement relatives, justice was finally served. Lester Ralph Jones was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, ensuring he can no longer harm innocent people. Page's courageous story stands as a powerful reminder of the significance of persisting in the pursuit of justice, no matter how long and arduous the journey may be. Her memory will forever be cherished by those who knew and loved her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lauren Burke. Lauren Ashley Burke was born on December 30th, 1989 in Marietta, Georgia, to James Burke and Vivian Gershon, who later divorced. She had 2 siblings, Jacqueline and Chad Burke. After high school, Lauren attended Auburn University, where she studied graphic design and was an active member of the Delta Gamma sorority. She also played lacrosse and was involved in various campus activities. Her friends described her as a friendly, excellent student who was always smiling, happy, and helpful. Lauren started dating Sean McQuaid while still in high school, and they continued their relationship when they both enrolled at Auburn University. At that time, education was their top priority, but they still made plans for their future together. Tragically, on March 4, 2008, she began the day by having breakfast with Sean at a cafe at 11 a.m. She then attended class and called her father, James, to discuss plans for spring break and a dentist appointment. After finishing her conversation with her father, Lauren visited her friend Sean in his dorm room, where she stayed until the evening. At 8:30 p.m., she had a planned study session with her classmate Michael at the library. When Lauren left Sean's room around 8 p.m., it was already dark outside. She got into her car, a black 2001 Honda Civic, which was parked in the lot next to the dorm. This was the last time Sean saw her. Michael waited for Lauren at the library, but she didn't show up. He started calling her cell phone, but she didn't answer. He kept calling and eventually got through to her. Lauren told him she had forgotten about their appointment and hung up. About an hour later, at 9 p.m., a 911 call was made, reporting an injured girl lying on the roadside near the Farmville Baptist Church and Route 280 on the 147 freeway. Lauren was lying in the middle of the road, taking slow, deep breaths because she was suffocating. She had many injuries on her body and was only wearing socks on her feet. The traffic in both directions was blocked because drivers had stopped their cars in the roadway to help her. At 9:12 p.m., the police arrived, but Lauren was already unconscious. A few minutes later, paramedics came and found that Lauren's pulse was very weak as they loaded her into the ambulance. She was taken to East Alabama Medical Center at 9:35 p.m., where doctors started trying to save her life. Around the same time, at 9:27 p.m., multiple people called 911 to report a car on fire on the Auburn University campus. Firefighters and police were sent to the scene, but they couldn't find the owner of the burning car among the students who had come out of their dorms to see the fire. When the police checked the license plate, they found out that the car belonged to James Burke, a resident of Georgia. But what they didn't know was that James Burke is Lauren's father. The police called James and learned that the burned-out Honda actually belonged to his daughter Lauren, who is a student at Auburn University. James was frantic to know what was happening with his daughter, but the police couldn't give him any information. They didn't know where Lauren was and claimed no one was in the burned-out car. James tried calling Lauren's cell phone, but she didn't answer, which only made him more anxious. Desperate for news, James reached out to his daughter's friends, but none of them knew anything about her whereabouts or the car fire. He then contacted his ex-wife, Vivian, Lauren's mother, hoping she might know something, but she was also in the dark. Vivian called Lauren's boyfriend, Sean, at 9:40 p.m. to inform him that Lauren was missing and her car had been burned. Sean started making calls to their mutual friends to see if anyone had seen Lauren that evening. He discovered that she had canceled a library meeting, claiming she had forgotten about it. Sean was certain that Lauren hadn't forgotten her evening appointment because she had told him she was heading to the library when she left his room 2 hours earlier. Meanwhile, Lauren's family and friends were searching for her, unaware of the desperate situation unfolding at East Alabama Medical Center, where doctors were fighting to save her life. Lauren was brought to the hospital unconscious and without identification, so the doctors didn't know who she was. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to save her, and she was pronounced dead about an hour after admission. The autopsy revealed that she had died from a single bullet wound that had punctured both lungs. The shot had been fired from very close range, with the gun muzzle just inches from her skin. As police investigated the burned-out car on campus, whose owner was missing, they quickly pieced together the evidence and realized that the hospital's unidentified victim was Lauren Burke. On March 5, 2008, James Burke identified his daughter Lauren's body after traveling from Atlanta. The news of her death quickly spread throughout the Auburn University campus. As Lauren's loved ones mourned her loss, the police worked to uncover the circumstances surrounding her death, including the connection between her murder and the car fire. They also sought to determine whether other students were at risk. Investigators processed both the scene where Lauren's body was found and the area around her car for evidence. Auburn Police Captain Tom Stauffer stated that the department has dedicated all available resources to finding the person responsible for the crime, as the tight-knit student community of Auburn, Alabama, takes such incidents very seriously. The police are deeply invested in solving the case and will not rest until the perpetrator is caught. To aid in the investigation, Alabama Governor Bob Riley has offered a $10,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest. The burned-out car belonging to Lauren Burks was brought to the Auburn Police Department, where state forensic laboratory investigators and state fire chief's office officers examined the charred remains. Their search uncovered burned clothing fragments, a melted digital camera, and the car's owner's manual. A significant discovery was a .38 caliber bullet found under the front seat, suggesting that the car's interior may have been the crime scene and that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. Investigations involved interviews with Lauren's family, friends, and boyfriend, but none could identify a suspect who had a motive to harm her. Prior to her death, Lauren had been at a Sean's dorm, so detectives searched his room but found nothing linking him to the crime. After talking to Michael, the person Lauren was supposed to meet at the library, detectives discovered that when Lauren answered his call, he heard a sound similar to a moving car in the background. This new information led them to investigate further, and they found that Lauren's bank card had been used multiple times shortly after she was found lying in the road. It seemed likely that the person using Lauren's bank card was involved in her incident, so the police started searching for them. However, the case took an unexpected turn soon after. Just 2 days after Lauren's death, on March 7, 2008, at 9:55 a.m., a similar attack occurred at a Walmart parking lot in Newnan, Georgia, about 75 miles from Auburn. A 72-year-old woman was assaulted by a man of African descent as she was getting into her car. The attacker hit her on the head, threatened her, and forced her to move to the passenger seat. He then got into the driver's seat and tried to drive away, but realized an eyewitness was following him and calling for help. The perpetrator, fearing the police would be called, returned to the Walmart parking lot where they had initially been spotted. They abandoned the stolen vehicle, got into a nearby silver Chrysler Sebring, and sped away. Several hours later, 4 officers began a high-speed chase to catch the fleeing Chrysler as it headed towards Columbus, West Georgia. The driver of the Chrysler refused to stop, putting other drivers at risk during the pursuit. Officers observed the driver throwing an object out of the window, which was later found to be a .38 caliber revolver. The chase continued until the Chrysler broke down, billowing smoke from under the hood. The driver stopped abruptly in the middle of the road and opened the door. A pursuing police officer on a motorcycle crashed into the open door, causing the officer to fly over the handlebars and fall to the ground. Fortunately, the officer was not seriously injured. The perpetrator then attempted to flee into the nearby woods, but was quickly caught by the police and taken into custody. Courtney Lockhart was born on October 20, 1984. According to his family, he was a pleasant and fun-loving person before enlisting in the U.S. Army. However, after serving in Iraq from 2004 to 2005, he returned as a changed person. His mother described Courtney as a cheerful individual, but after his return from Iraq, his behavior drastically changed. He stopped smiling, became paranoid about people standing behind him, and would often hide in closets or under the bed. In 2006, Lockhart's personal life took a toll when he had a daughter with his ex-girlfriend. The same year, he was court-martialed for assaulting fellow soldiers, using illegal substances, and abandoning his unit without permission. As a result, he spent 7 months in detention before being dishonorably discharged from the Army in December 2006. In the following years, Lockhart's life spiraled out of control. By 2008, he had become increasingly troubled, neglecting his personal hygiene, abandoning his responsibilities as a father, and developing a severe addiction to illegal substances. Between February 2008 and the time of his capture, Lockhart committed a series of burglaries using a consistent modus operandi. Courtney Lockhart targeted women, approaching them from behind in parking lots as they got into their cars. He would threaten them with a gun, demand their purses, and try to take their cars. Tragically, one of these crimes ended in the death of Lauren Burke. Lockhart's string of assaults came to an end on March 7, 2008, when he attacked a 72-year-old woman but failed to escape a police pursuit. After his arrest, Lockhart, then 23, confessed to the police that he was responsible for kidnapping and killing Lauren Burke. The police interrogation, which was recorded on video, became a crucial piece of evidence in the trial. Additionally, the police found Lauren's personal belongings, including her iPod and bank cards, in Lockhart's car. Lockhart provided a detailed account of the events leading up to Lauren's death. On Tuesday, March 4, 2008, he woke up in his silver Chrysler Sebring, which he had been sleeping in near the East Alabama Medical Center. Desperate for money, he drove around Auburn looking for another victim to target. It's notable that Lockhart exclusively targeted women, never men. He eventually ended up on the campus of Auburn University, where he parked near the student dorms and spent several hours watching students from his car. At 8 p.m., Lockhart saw a girl, who turned out to be Lauren, casually walk up to the car parked next to him and open the door. Without hesitation, Lockhart grabbed his revolver and approached Lauren from behind. He poked her with the gun muzzle and demanded to know how much money she had. When she didn't respond, he forced her into the front passenger seat and got behind the wheel himself. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Realizing the police would soon arrive, he hastily left the scene, planning to destroy evidence he had left in his car. Lockhart drove to a gas station, where he used Lauren's bank card to buy a can of gasoline. He then doused the interior of his car with the gasoline, got back in, and drove to the campus where he had initially taken Lauren. His Chrysler was parked there. As he drove, Lockhart became lightheaded from the gasoline fumes, so he rolled down the windows to let in some fresh air. Once he arrived on campus, Lockhart stole $46, an iPod, and Lauren's bank cards from her car. He then set the car on fire and drove away in his Chrysler. At a gas station, Lockhart filled up his tank using Lauren's money, then returned to campus. However, investigators began to question Lockhart's story, suspecting that he had ulterior motives for making Lauren undress. They thought that Lockhart's goal was not to prevent her from escaping, but rather to exploit her in some way. When Lauren jumped out of the moving car, Lockhart's true intentions were foiled. The investigators were skeptical about Lockhart's claim that he accidentally shot Lauren. Given his military background and experience with guns, it seemed unlikely that he would accidentally discharge his weapon. Instead, it appeared that Lauren realized she was in grave danger and decided to escape by jumping out of the car, at which point Lockhart intentionally shot her. Forensic tests confirmed that the bullet found in Lauren's car was fired from the same gun Lockhart had abandoned during a police chase. Expert analysis also ruled out the possibility of an accidental shot, as the trigger required significant force to fire. On March 9th, investigators questioned Lockhart for the second time. The next day, he was officially charged with multiple crimes related to Lauren Burke's case. The trial started on November 8th, 2010. Lockhart's lawyers argued that their client suffered from a mental illness due to his military service, and that Lauren's shooting was accidental. According to court records, Lockhart pleaded not guilty, citing mental defect or insanity as the reason. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lynn Keel. Lynn and Elizabeth Keel had been married for over 20 years. Lynn worked as a truck driver, while Elizabeth was employed by Microbac Laboratories. They lived in a secluded house in Nash County, North Carolina. On January 1, 2006, Elizabeth slipped on the icy steps outside their house and fell, hitting her head on the concrete corner. The injury was fatal, and her life was tragically cut short. After a year, Lynn began to rebuild his life after a devastating event. He made a career change, leaving his job as a truck driver to pursue a new path in real estate. In 2007, his real estate work brought him to Latin America, where he met Diana, a 26-year-old woman from Bogota, Colombia. Diana was not only attractive, but also had a kind heart and was a dedicated single mother to her young daughter. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and Diana was drawn to the idea of a better life in America. She moved to the United States to be with Lynn, and they settled into his home in Nash County. This was the same house where Lynn's wife, Elizabeth Keel, had tragically died in an accident about a year earlier. Before long, Lynn and Diana got married, and soon they welcomed a son named Max into their family. Diana graduated from Nash Community College in 2017 and began working as an emergency room nurse at Wilson Medical Center the same year. In the early years of her relationship, everything seemed normal, but over time, things took a turn for the worse. According to Diana, her partner Lynn became controlling and verbally abusive, often speaking harshly to her. By 2019, Diana's daughter Laura had turned 18 and was attending the University of North Carolina at Wilmington after graduating from Southern Nash High School. Meanwhile, Diana's 10-year-old son Max was living with his parents. Diana's colleagues and patients at Wilson Medical Center held her in high regard, respecting and admiring her both personally and professionally. On March 7, 2019, Diana's mother, Esperanza Prada, who lived in Colombia, received an unexpected message from Diana that read, "Mom, I love you very much." Esperanza was disturbed by this message because she was aware that Diana was miserable in her marriage and longed to get a divorce, but Diana's fear of her husband prevented her from taking the intervention. 3 days later, Laura tweeted a plea for help, saying her mom Diana was missing and asking others to spread the word if they saw or heard anything. On the same day, Laura contacted the medical center where her mother, Diana, worked, but none of Diana's co-workers had seen or heard from her in the past 48 hours. An employee at the medical center notified the police, requesting a welfare check on Diana. The co-worker informed the dispatcher that Diana had been unreachable for 2 days. When the police officer arrived at the Keel family home, Lynn Keel was present. It was unusual that his wife's disappearance had been reported to the police by her co-workers, rather than by him. Lynn told the officer that he had last seen Diana 2 days prior, on March 8th, when she left the house. The presence of her car still parked outside the house raised further suspicions. Lynn was summoned for further questioning. When interrogated, 57-year-old Keel stated that his wife had gone out to run errands but never came back. He claimed she sometimes left for several days at a time, but his explanation was not believable. he was released without being charged. Meanwhile, Diana was reported missing, prompting the police to launch a search for her. The investigation revealed that Diana hadn't used her cell phone or bank cards in several days, which was a disturbing sign. The house where this incident took place is located in a secluded area, far from any neighbors who could provide valuable information to the police. Despite this, detectives discovered that on the morning of March 8th, Diana and Lynn had a loud and intense argument on their front porch. On the day Diana went missing, a courier delivered a package addressed to her, making him the last person to see her, aside from her husband, Lynn Keel. After speaking with Diana's co-workers, the police were convinced that she wouldn't abandon her 10-year-old son and flee. The only reason Diana didn't divorce Lynn was her fear of losing custody of her child. Everyone the detective interviewed suspected only one person of being involved in Diana's disappearance: her husband, Lynn Keel. Early in the investigation, a troubling discovery was made. 2 years prior to Diana's disappearance, Lynn had taken out a life insurance policy on her worth over $1 million, with him as the sole beneficiary. A domestic dispute had taken place at the Keel house in 2008, although no further action was taken. Just 2 days into the investigation, the police received a disturbing call. A North Carolina Department of Transportation employee reported finding something on Pokes Hole Road. A man called the police to report something suspicious in the woods, saying he wasn't sure what it was, possibly a body, but he didn't know how far in it was. The dispatcher asked if it was at the end of the road, and the caller confirmed he would wait there. Tragically, what the caller had stumbled upon was Diana's body, which appeared to have been there since the day she went missing. It turned out the caller was a worker who had been checking an illegal dumping site when he made the discovery. The body was found on Pokes Hole Road, a dead-end street surrounded by farmland. Considering the location was 30 miles from Diana's home, it was fortunate that the police found her body when they did. If not for the worker's discovery, it could have taken the police much longer to find her. At the police station, the investigators questioned Lynn about Diana's disappearance. He stuck to his story, claiming that she would often leave for several days, but always come back. However, this contradicted what her co-workers, relatives, and friends had said. It was common knowledge that Lynn Keel exerted total control over his wife's life, even preventing her from socializing with friends. Despite the inconsistencies in his alibi, the police released him pending the outcome of the autopsy. 2 days after the body was found, authorities confirmed that it was indeed Diana Keel. Her death was devastating for her children, family, and friends. The medical examiner's report revealed the shocking details of Diana's death. The autopsy showed that she suffered from severe skull fractures and multiple sharp wounds on the left side of her face and neck. Notably, some of these injuries occurred after her death, suggesting that the perpetrator may have had a personal vendetta against her. When police arrived to arrest Lynn Keel and search his home, they found that he had already fled. A nationwide wanted list was issued, warning that he might be driving a gold-colored pickup truck and that he could be dangerous. After being questioned at the police station, Lynn Keel drove his 10-year-old son to his parents' home, took his father's car, and escaped. A search warrant was issued for the home Lynn shared with his wife Diana, and authorities seized a collection of firearms, including rifles, pistols, and revolvers, as well as swords, a machete, and multiple knives. During the search, authorities also found 2 pages from a diary belonging to Diana's 18-year-old daughter in a Dodge Ram owned by Lynn Keel. When asked about the contents of the diary pages, the sheriff declined to comment, stating that he did not feel comfortable sharing the information. The search for Lynn Keel, Diana's husband, continued as his whereabouts remained unknown after leaving the state. Although the sheriff's office received tips about his truck's location in Texas and Florida, no further information about his capture was confirmed. Stone requested the public's help to look out for Keel's pickup truck with the listed license plate number at local motels and hotels. On March 17, 2019, 5 days after Diana's body was found, Arizona State Police arrested Lynn Keel, 34 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border. At the time of his arrest, he had a large amount of cash and canned goods, allegedly planning to escape into Mexico. Following his arrest, Lynn Keel was flown back to Nash County, where he was charged with his wife's murder and kidnapping. Investigators believed Diana was still alive when she was put into her own SUV, driven into the woods, and left to die. Forensic evidence found in the bedroom of their home confirmed that the attack on Diana took place there. After abducting Diana, Keel went to a remote area and later visited a local Walmart to purchase cleaning supplies, which he used to try to conceal evidence of the crime. The heinous nature of the crime, combined with Keel's attempted escape from justice, sparked widespread media coverage at the local, state, and national levels. As a result, the public defender requested a change of venue to select a jury pool outside of Nash County, away from the intense media scrutiny. Lynn Keel, 59, pleaded no contest to the charges in October 2021, avoiding a long trial. By doing so, Keel accepted responsibility for the crimes. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. Keel's defense team requested that the judge consider his deteriorating health, specifically his kidney failure, and the fact that he has been in prison for 2 years during the sentencing. However, Diana's mother addressed the court, remembering the tragic reason her daughter was killed. She took the opportunity to convey a crucial message to women who may be in similar situations, urging them to leave abusive partners and not stay in harmful relationships. Diana Alejandra Keel's family expressed their gratitude to law enforcement for capturing and bringing to justice Lynn Keel, the suspect in Diana's murder. It remains unclear what motivated Lynn Keel to commit the crime, but it's possible he was driven by his discovery that Diana planned to meet with a lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings and was also aware of a life insurance policy worth over $1 million. Lynn Keel received a prison sentence of 32 to 41 years. However, the investigation didn't end there. Authorities also looked into the death of Lynn Keel's first wife, Elizabeth, which was initially ruled an accident. But her family had always questioned the events that led to her death. Elizabeth Keel's body may be exhumed if new evidence arises. Dr. John Butts, a veteran medical examiner, only considers exhumation when there are unanswered questions. While some initially accidental deaths were later deemed murders, there's been no new information in Keel's case in 2 years, suggesting no reason to reopen the investigation. However, new details may emerge in the future.